Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Big Conversations. We've had you, Jojo. Who else has been here twice? We've had less than 10 people who have managed to do this 2 times. So yeah, well, we're about to start giving out awards for people who come back. Congratulations on the book. One thing is, for me, I have very many thoughts and dreams of writing a book, but when I sit on my computer and I say it's time to write, I end up on YouTube watching Will Smith slapping someone. Congratulations on the book, and first run me through the effort or the process, basically. How do you get from I have these very good thoughts that I want to print out to I have a book published. What is the process there? Yeah.
Well, first off, thank you for having me again. I was sharing with you all about how I really enjoyed the first time I was hosted on this podcast. So I would say the process for publishing a book, which is, I like drawing parallels from my life and from my profession. There's a matter that I am looking into with some book publishers, and they were giving us the history of how publishing started in Uganda, how before, especially for educational books. You recall the books we had, Longman and Oxford. Those were all foreign-based books, or books that were not published from Uganda. And then, so from when publishing was liberalized, I think that was in the early 90s, maybe 95, 96. From then, I'm told that the hassle of publishing a book was, it was very prevalent, in the sense that you would have to look for an illustrator, for a designer, and then you look for a publisher to be able to publish your book. So somehow, even from that time up to now, those challenges are still there. To get the book, I had to look for an illustrator, but thankfully there's a friend of mine, Gibbons Katule, who did an awesome job illustrating the book and putting all the graphics that you see in there, the cover page. He really took the direction that was given, and he created something amazing. And then, of course, looking for a publisher, I decided to publish the book locally. One, because of the content of the book. It is not a book that you can put in one box. Say maybe it's a book about philosophy or a book about religion. And so it was difficult to find a publisher that I felt would be able to understand. But also, I think, the older you get, the more you start to appreciate where you come from. And so I felt and I thought that Uganda would be a good place as well. The story would continue, that if this book was published in Uganda and it found its way wherever it finds its way, then I'd feel happier. And so I self-published the book, another person, Shubra Kasozi, is the one who assisted in putting everything together finding a printer and printing the book. And then, of course, then where you're seeing it now, in Aristoc, on Mahiri, and the airport, and a few other bookstores that have requested for the book. Well, first tell me about the illustrations. I saw the leaf that many people may misinterpret as marijuana. And I'm the Zen guy. So first describe to me the sort of the vision for this specific illustration. Yeah. Well, if they also interpreted it as marijuana, I also wouldn't mind that. But beyond that, so when I spoke with Gibbons, we agreed that the book should be given a simple cover. I didn't want something too elaborate, or something that would draw away from the simplicity of the book. And so we thought really that having an image, which is an image, you don't know if that's a man or a woman, sitting sort of almost cross-legged, and then you have a vine coming from their person. It's a simple illustration really that shows the non-duality of being. As you can see, there are lines, but the lines don't seem to connect, or yet they seem to connect, and that's really, it's the cover as well illustrates the impermanence of things. And I hope that is something that we shall get to talk about as we go along.
I think it's time to dive in. So one thing, so I first of all read this book in a rush, because I initially thought when we bought the book, I initially thought you're going to come in. I'm a very slow reader, I have to confess. I tried to read in a rush so that when you say I'm ready to come, I'm ready to like sort of I've read, I have enough information to have this conversation. But I also didn't want to have the conversation where we sort of give away the book, basically. Yeah, I wanted the podcast to be mostly about your own thoughts about, you know, what you're writing about. So the conversation will mostly be about what I thought the book is about, but don't sort of feel restricted to get right to the book. It's sort of more about the message itself, you know, what is it exactly? Think of it as the book tour, you know.
Yes.
What are you telling? That's sort of the thoughts I have. And the first question, right? The book is heavy on references, right? So when you read, there's a quote from this book, there's a quote from this book, there's a quote from this book. What is this to you as a process, you know? Are you doing like research, you know, what's it called? Like if you're doing a PhD, for example, right?
Yes.
And you're writing your dissertation, I don't know if they call it dissertation, you're writing that book, the thing you submit. Usually you have a library of things you reference. Is this the sort of the same attitude you brought towards writing this book, or is this just the way you naturally think of things? Yeah.
Well, I never thought of it that way, but I guess in answering it, I'm an academic. And so being an academic, sometimes you have to, one, rely on the privileged knowledge that other people have given to the world, but also the topics that I write about really. I usually have a lot of conversations with my wife, and whenever we discuss, she's always asking me, you know, how sure are you that this is the right message? How sure are you that you're not just putting, you know, your thoughts alone? And so in coming up with a book and in deciding to publish said book, what I considered really was, one, what have other people spoken about these things? And I teach meditation, and meditation is not something that has existed just for a few years. It's something that has existed for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so all those hundreds or thousands of years, you had many teachers that have passed down these messages, either verbally or in writings. And of course, the other references and the biggest ones, books like the Bible is books that contain the Word of God. And so in referencing many of these materials, I was basically trying to show readers that, one, these things exist, in the sense that you can be able to find many of the things that I write about in many other books as well. But I think what maybe sets a book apart, or what would make you pick up a book of another, is how the writer has gone through the process and how they have basically presented the book to you. It's the same thing as food. You can have very many ingredients in the garden. If I wanted to cook a curry or any dish, I would go pick tomatoes, onions.
I see what you mean.
But the chef would be the one perhaps that would see the difference between a dish that you will remember or a dish that you will forget as soon as you leave the place that you have eaten the dish from. And so all these sources are me trying to speak to other chefs and to understand, how did you go about this process? How did you arrive at this particular conclusion? But overall, really, I try to draw from my own experiences, and you see the book is heavily Ugandan. I am a Ugandan, and this is something I am very proud of. And so all the examples that I give, sometimes we pick too much from the Western world. And you can see that with what is happening today. If you're looking at the war between Ukraine and Russia, I've also had a few discussions with a number of people saying, okay, everything you're reading online is Russia this, Russia that, Russia that. So without looking at the war, of course, in war, it's the casualties that we're suffering with, and we see how much pain that has caused. But you also cannot hide from the fact that everything that you read online sometimes is perhaps pushing a particular agenda, a particular propaganda, if I may use that term. And so I've seen that in music, I've seen that in popular culture, that for many of us, the things that we relate to are not things that are Ugandan, but things that we have seen in movies, things that we have read in books, things that we have been told. And most times they take away from that authenticity, from that Ugandanness. And so my worry as well was to have all these principles, because these are mostly Eastern principles, principles from Tibet and from India, from Asia mostly, but then drawing a parallel to religions like Christianity, where it has its roots in Israel. But all those still, how do they apply to me, the individual, to me as Kenneth, to you as Mark, to you as Kenneth? How do you then have these principles? How do you relate them to your day-to-day life, where you are here in this Kampala of ours? And so those references really, as I mentioned, was a way to show anyone as well that, look, these things that I'm writing about are not things that I've come up with just from my head. They're things that have been taught, they're things that have been told, and I use practical examples to be able to allow my readers to be able to appreciate the message that is in the book.
Yeah. First of all, I'm going to say that I appreciate it. I enjoyed reading the book. What the most, for me, impressive thing was, first of all, the patience it takes to write a book, right? And also, especially, so usually one of the things that for me would distract me from writing would be if I've read that. So one thing I realized, again, the reason I brought up the references thing is it's one thing to be aware that someone had a thought like this, and my thought is sort of the Newton thing, I'm sitting on the shoulders of the giants, right? My thought is based on that. But then it's one thing to think. For me, one of the things that struck me is thinking, this has already been thought. It's not original enough for me to write. That's sort of that's what I appreciate a lot about the book. But when it comes to sort of meditation, I used to have a very strong practice. I mean, right now I would say mostly a casual meditator. I do 15 minutes a day. But I used to have a very, very strong practice. I read deeply into meditation, and I read a little bit into mysticism and magic and all that stuff. So I had a very, very big, a certain part of my life, especially around 2018, 2017, was strongly inside, sort of trying to figure out the self. Yeah, and so...
What changed?
Yeah? Well, I think I figured it out. I'm kidding. I think that, we're going to talk about that. Okay. I think this is where conversation is going to go. Okay. My understanding of why we meditate today is different from at that point. So at that point, even if I try to, how I remember, right? I figured out the practice. Okay, not figured out. I was comfortable with her teachers. So one of the books I read that I think was very inspiring, I think the one that introduced me to it was Mindfulness in Plain English by Ganatana, the Indian name, I think. Ganatana, I think that's the way they pronounce the name. But then I read the other one, this guy calls himself Chuladasa. I think he's called John Yates, his real name, but his meditation teacher calling himself Chuladasa. It's called The Mind Illuminated, yeah. And so the first one, Mindfulness in Plain English, is a wisdom book. Guy tells you why you should not overburden your mind with thoughts, why you should be empathetic. Basically, it's a typical keep mindful, but also it has that meta theme, the meta version of loving kindness, right? Don't take things so seriously, but also remember to love and to be kind. Right? So that was the big theme of Mindfulness in Plain English. And then this book by Chuladasa is mostly about, it's sort of trying to be technical, right? Trying to be, right now I find it too simplistic, but at that point it was so convincing. So he's a neuroscientist, and he's trying to map that, how does the mind basically, how do you improve your mind through meditation, and he's trying to make the argument with some sort of scientism, some pseudoscience. Right now I look at it like mostly pseudoscience, it's not real science anymore to me, but he's basically referring to what he knows from neuroscience about how the brain works, and sort of he's a very, very strong meditator. What he knows, what his experience through meditation, and trying to make up that bridge, right? So yeah, those are the first two books that strongly inspired me. The third one was by a guy, this I think is still my favorite-ish, by a guy called Daniel Ingram. It's called The Teachings of the Buddha, the Hardcore Teachings of the Buddha. Is it something like that? I forget the title now. Yeah. So this guy says, forget the thinking, right? just as I say, basically, this is, think of it as what? As math. You don't have to know why 2 plus 2 is equal to 1, right? The technique is when you add 1 plus 1 plus 1, this is the rule, basically. Yeah. So his tactic is just do it. Don't try to overthink it. When you're done with your practice, go and philosophize about life. Yeah. But when you're doing the practice, don't bother yourself at all with what it all means and whatever. Just start doing it. So his strong emphasis was on insight, right? Mostly I think arising and passing away, sitting, letting it come, letting it go, and trying to stay as present as possible, right? Yeah. And now we come to your book, right? So one thing that, and again, this I picked up the first time we talked, the idea of God. One thing that I got from my experience as a meditator was it brought me slightly further away from God. Okay, so that's one way to think about it. One way is it brought me further away from God. That's one way to think about it. One way is it demystified God so much that I don't see myself any different from God. So it's not a mysterious thing. It's not something I even have to talk about anymore. It's not a relevant concept to me anymore, right? And I remember when we had that conversation, there is the omnipotence bit about God that I don't like, right? Because it's not comprehensible to a human mind, the sort of limitless version, right? And the thing that I want to talk about, one is, okay, I'm going to jump a bit around because of the way I also remember the book. But yeah, I'll do a second reading. So one thing is, let's talk about God and what God means to you in terms of meditation, and then I think we'll start from there.
Okay. Before I answer that question, could we try something? Could we just breathe, just for a moment? So you're going to breathe in through your nose, hold it, and breathe out through your nose again. Let's do that 3 times. Breathe in through your nose, and out through your nose. Breathe in through your nose, and out through your nose. A short exercise like that, you already feel like something is off your chest, or something has been lifted. And that really shows you that meditation is one of those tools that shows you that peace is with you everywhere you go. One of my inspiration or teachers is the late Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Zen Buddhist. And he passed on actually at the beginning of the year. And one of the biggest things that he taught, and it's even in the title of his book, Peace is in Every Step, is that mindfulness allows you to be able to draw from wherever you are, in whatever situation that you are. So with the turmoil, of life and its complexities, it's difficult to live without all these imprints that are occasioned to you, either to you in terms of your physical body, if you fall sick, in terms of your mind, if you're depressed or going through anything that would then make you feel sad or make you feel low. But the act of breathing, the simple act of breathing, is something that has worked for me, something that has worked for thousands and thousands and thousands, if not millions of people. But beyond that as well, just you trying to just breathe in and out. What it does is that it brings you back to the present moment here. And in bringing you back to the present moment, the more that you come back to the present moment, the more that your mind does not move, from here or there, from past or present. You're in the present moment. Now, one of the deeper messages of meditation, and that will allow me then to answer your question about God, is meditation allows you to introspect or to see into the nature of things. So if I breathe in, I am breathing in the fresh air. I'm breathing in oxygen. Now, the more that I inquire into what I'm breathing in, the more that my mind is, tickled, the more that my mind is alive, that if I'm breathing in oxygen, okay, so what is the composition of oxygen? Why is oxygen so important to my well-being? Why is oxygen so important to me living and not dropping dead here? And so the more that you breathe in, as I said, is the more that you also start to realize how complex these things are. That beyond the simple act of breathing in, you look at the mechanics of our bodies, the mechanics of our minds, that oxygen needs to travel everywhere in the body. But we have blood, we have red blood cells that allow this oxygen to travel every part of the body. And the more that you then look deeper as well into things like the mind, how complicated the mind is, how complex the brain is, how complex the body is, you start to see that surely there is another force at hand, perhaps, that is putting all these things in the way that they are. And beyond that as well, now, when you go into physics, you go into biology, you also start to see that the same rules that apply in physics, as above, so below. You and I have had many conversations about the fundamental forces, for example. And you start to see that many of these rules as well apply to within you. And so, again, you start to see, okay, maybe what we call, and this is something, I'm not sure what your mind is on this, whether all these things that I've mentioned are random. That the act of breathing in would allow you to be able to live. And I am trying to, I'm just trying to simplify that without looking at exactly what it means to live. And so if you look at every single thing, the way that it works, and, that ebb and flow, and you see how connected, seemingly connected, but also connected everything is, you start to see that maybe there is a guiding hand that is doing all these things. I will segue to a topic I love a lot, dreams. So I love dreams because dreams, one, allow you to again question nature and also to question reality as it is. And this is the question that I've asked so many people. How do you know that where we're sitting now, that this is not a dream? And if you look deeper into that question, you start to see maybe that your answer would be, no, but I'm here. I can feel, I can see, I can touch. But if you've tried something they call lucid dreaming, which is the act of waking up in a dream, you understand that you're in a dream and you awake in that particular dream, you start to see that dream world is, my God, it's exactly like this. And the more that I lucid dream, the more that I am convinced that there is a connection between what I see in my dreams and what is outside, or what I call waking life. Now, in one of my last lucid dreams, so there are particular rules that you must follow when you're lucid dreaming, in a sense, if you want to continue to lucid dream. One is that go with the flow of the dream. Don't try to change the narrative. And then, of course, even before you lucid dream, since I'm talking about lucid dreaming, there are triggers that will allow you, or there are signs that will allow you to wake up and see that now I am dreaming. Things like if you look at your hands, you find that you have 10 or 20 fingers instead of the 10 that you have in front of you. You notice and so the more that you notice these fingers within waking life, because these are tools that you're supposed to use within waking life, so that when you're asleep, those messages stored in your subconscious also allow you to notice these things as you're going through your dream. But we can look deep. We can talk deep about that if this is something that your listeners would be interested in listening in. But to answer the question, and as I said, I had segued into this conversation about lucid dreams. So in one of the last lucid dreams that I had, I lucid dreamt. And so I woke up in my dream, and of course the dream was like this, exactly the way you're sitting here, and everyone else that is around. I could smell the air, I could feel myself, and I was there, but I knew that I was asleep in a bed, but here I was awake in a dream. And this is not something that is, mystic or whatever it is. Please feel free to look these things up and see, but also try to experience it for yourself. Lucid dreaming is not, there's no science to it. It's the same way you'd have a thought. That's the same way lucid dreaming is real to me and is real, can be real to you as well. Anyway, so in this lucid dream, somehow I tried to change the narrative. I remember, I think I was walking through a hall and there were a number of people there. And so someone comes to speak to me. And so as they come to speak to me, I try to, push them away. And again, now that's something that later on, after I had awakened, I was thinking, okay, how come in my dreams I am trying to push people away? Is this a reflection perhaps of something that I need to deal with in my waking life? But as I tried to do so, then the dream changed. And so my mind tried to wake me up. So before I sleep, so like you, I'm an added meditator. I sit every morning before I go to work or before I do anything else. The first thing I do is sit and meditate. And I realized that the comfortable time for me is 1 hour, which is not too long and not too short. And so my life, in all honesty, revolves around that 1 hour that I sit to meditate, because it grounds me, allows me to start my day with clarity and with balance. And so I also, where I stay, I sleep with the windows open. And sometimes when it rains, the rain can be able to get in, and my meditation chair is right by the window. So sometimes, some nights when it rains, I will move the meditation chair. I'll just move it away from the window slightly, and also remove a blanket or throw that I use to be able to warm me whenever I am meditating. So the night before I slept, I had put my blanket, which is just, a very small blanket. I had also, I drink a lot of water, so I had my water bottle. I got in all those things and put them on a table on the side. And I had put a towel on top of the chair, so just in case, rain still finds it wherever I have moved it, somehow that the seat will not get wet. And so going back to the dream, I wake up from that lucid dream, and it was I woke up violently because I was woken up by the dream characters. So it was still dark. I get out of bed. I noticed the seat where it is. I noticed the towel on top of the seat. And then I had forgotten where the things where I look, they're not there. I turn on the table, and lo and behold, that's where they are. So I pick up my blanket, I pick up my water bottle. So as I'm getting out of the room, I notice that my son is getting out of bed as well. I'm like, okay. I left him in bed, in his own bed. So I don't know what he's doing in my bed, but I just, brushed it off because I wanted to go and meditate. And I also looked at the watch, and it was 6:30. Now, before I'd gone to sleep, I had told my subconscious, I told myself I need to wake up because I had a meeting at 7:30. And because I meditate for 1 hour, the best time for me to wake up would have been 5 p.m. So I meditate up to 6, and then I can dress up, do whatever, get out of the house by 6:30 and beat the traffic so that I'm at office by 7:30. So I woke up at 6:30. So the only thing that I was thinking about was, okay, let me just put in meditation time. I'm definitely going to be late for my meeting, but that's okay. And so as I was getting out, I tricked my son so that he can go to the bathroom so that his mother can be the one to deal with him. And then as I ran out, I closed the door. And guess what? I wake up. Now, that shocked me. I remember the few days after that, I was still thinking, okay, is this a dream? Because that particular construct was so real. It was the realest dream I had ever had. But I still didn't know that I was dreaming. And so I started to inquire into that and to think about, okay, what has just happened? And I started to think deeply now. That's why I'm saying meditation as well. And many of these tools allow you to inquire deeply into a moment. And one of the things that I realized is that your subconscious, my subconscious in particular, stores all this information. And so when it woke me up from that dream, the fastest thing that it would do was to reconstruct the image of what had happened just right before I went to bed. That was, I think, the fastest thing that my mind could do to still keep me asleep, but still keep me dreaming. And so it constructed this particular scenery, and it took all the instructions, including instructions that I hadn't, that I didn't think that my brain was interpreting. Things like I have to wake up at that particular time because I looked at my watch, as I told you, and that was the time. Things like exactly where I'd put the cloth and where I'd put my water bottle. So that then got me thinking deeper into the nature of the subconscious. The subconscious stores all this information. And it stores so many things, even things that we don't think it is storing. And all this information is then interpreted as dreams. And then I also got further thought around that what if the nightmares we have and all these crazy things that happen in dreams are as a result then of emotions that kind of are the variable to the dream state or world that your brain has constructed. And I loved that thought because that then allowed me to understand dreams in an even deeper manner, but also allowed me to understand my subconscious in an even deeper manner. All these things that it had constructed were things that I had thought about that were there. Now, that then got me thinking about how the subconscious is similar to artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is machine learning. And when you look at machine learning, as long as you give it a foundation, it's able to, to do anything you want it to do, either within the confines of what you have coded, or if you're looking at general AI, even way outside whatever that you have given to it. It will learn on its own. And the subconscious seems to the way I thought about it, it appeared to me to be like AI. Had stored all this information. And the best example I could use are there are these Twitter bots that are on Twitter. I think we also had this discussion the last time that I was here, where we're talking about how some of them become racist because of the environment that they're in. And so that was the same thing. The subconscious doesn't know any better. It's just picking all this information and interpreting it the best way that it is possible. And in that interpretation, sometimes things can be crazy because it's picking from all these things, and some things will make sense, other things will not make sense. It's kind of like, as I've said, kind of like a computer, kind of like artificial intelligence. And again, going into the complexity of these things that I am talking about, it showed me again, how can all these things be random? How can all these things just have appeared out of nowhere? There has to be a guiding hand. And the foundations I have, I'm a Christian, and from my Christianity, of course, you learn about God, you learn about an omnipotent creator. And of course, the more that we talk about God, the more that, at least for me, the way that I have understood God, sometimes we think of God as someone orchestrates, playing a puppet master, making sure that every single step that you do is like this. We have an element of free will in this world while we're here. And again, this is something we can talk about later. But meditation has allowed me to see that I do not exist randomly, that there has to be someone or something that has created me. Now, the form of that something or someone, it's up to you to interpret based on what you believe, based on your foundation. But ultimately, you cannot convince me, and I dare you too, that everything that you're seeing in this world, that the plants, the trees, again, going back to your body, that the breath is so random that there's nothing that has put all these things together. And there's an author that I like called Arvin Laszlo. And in his book, I think it's called Reconnecting to the Source. This is a scientist, and he was writing about how the fine-tuning of the universe, if things were random, perhaps would be where we were maybe, I think, 6 or 7 million years ago. He was saying that if things were random, would not be where we are now. But the fine-tuning of the universe, the way the cosmos operates, the way that the planets are aligned, and everything the way that it is, shows that there might be a guiding hand. What we don't understand is what this guiding hand looks like. And again, without now going into speculation or going into elsewhere, meditation has allowed me to connect with God. And whenever you pick from all these sources, and this book picks from so many sources, picks from Christianity, from Buddhism, from Hinduism, and when you start to see the connecting thread across all those disciplines, you start to see again that God is present in every religion, God is present in every discipline, and in most philosophies. Because ultimately religion is a philosophy and faith is its substance. And so that substance, that faith, is what differs across different religions or across different boundaries. But we're all talking about the God without the construct of religion. And when you then go into things like people that have taken LSD and many of these psychedelics and the experiences that they have, how they then pierce the veil of the universe, so to speak, and go underneath and start to see all these things that seemingly exist in the real world but are not present to us if you do not have those glasses on. You also again start to see how beautiful the world is, and these feelings that we have, those feelings of love, those feelings of conviviality with nature, all still point to the fact that there must be a God.
I see. Okay, so yeah. First of all, that's beautiful. Now I'm not surprised anymore that you're writer. You have the eloquence in the way you sort of present what you think. So two things, right? So first of all, I think I told you this already. Like my real day job is software engineering, right?
Yes.
And I've ventured in big data and machine learning for some part of my career as well. And okay, let me first ask a question, right? Well, a series of them. Do you believe the aliens, like form of life, apart from the life that is on Earth?
That I have thought about that, and I don't know how to answer that without going deeper into the question. One, the search for okay.
I think I see where I go.
All right. One, the search for aliens or for other life, I think, is still human nature at work. The search for belonging and for accompaniment. And of course, the things that we mentioned as well, the questions are the way that the earth is formed and the way that it is. Perhaps there could be other versions of earth, or perhaps there could be other galaxies or other places. And of course, sci-fi makes that even more prevalent with the movies that we watch. I love sci-fi. And so, but as to whether they're aliens or not, honestly, I don't know. And in saying I don't know, I am confident in that answer because I truly don't know. Maybe there are people that know, maybe there are people that do not. So I cannot, on one hand, I'll say no because there's no evidence that I have seen that shows that there are other people other than us. But beyond that as well, I also understand that the nature of life is that we think we know these things, but we do not. And this is manifest in many of the things that, go on in life. Sometimes we think that we know what is going on, but in essence, we don't. We are really mostly run by our perceptions. And these perceptions allow you to be able to cognize and to be able to see things in a manner that you think perhaps is right, but may not be right. And so I do not know if they're aliens or not.
I think that's as valid an answer. It's probably the most honest of them all. The reason I ask is, and maybe I didn't make a big difference. So, for example, if you take a flower if you take a branch from a tree, right? For a period, even I think about even up to 2 days, it's hard to tell whether it's alive or not, right? So you can still say plant it in the soil and it will rejuvenate, or attach it to another tree and it will grow, something like that, right? But if you say Chester, the puppy, the dog that was there, right? When it dies, there is a clear transition of form. Okay, not like visually, maybe they may not be, but there is something that is visible that you can see that, this thing was, the thing that was alive a moment back is not the same as this thing lying here, right? So, the assumption for me is that that is life, right? And it doesn't have to be intelligent per se, right? But the third version, of course, would be life as in human life, for example, or even dogs, life that sort of signals to other forms of life that I am, first of all, alive and I'm available to engage, right? So sort of like life, there is a life that is where the line between life and death is a little bit complex when it comes to some plants. There is life where it's clear, this thing was once alive and, in its state right now, it's no longer, it doesn't have that element you could consider to be life. And then there is what? There is life that is intelligent, life that is communicating, right? And so my question was whether you think there's something special about, so maybe that was even a bigger question. Do you believe there are other planets in the world?
Of course, yes, there are other planets.
Do you believe there are other solar systems in the world?
I do not, I don't know.
Okay, let's see. Do you believe that this solar system is part of something that is called a galaxy?
As far as scientists have told me, that is what I see. And yes, the evidence seems to show that we're in a solar system.
That's obviously valid. So okay. So from my biases, I do believe there are many planets. I do believe because of that, there is nothing special about our planet. And I do believe that, again, inductively, following that same logic, that there must be more solar systems. There's nothing special about our solar system. There must be more galaxies. There's nothing special about the galaxy we live in. There must be more sort of things. Basically, the general expansion of things keeps going. That is, again, my assumption of how life works, right?
Okay.
And from also my biases, again, mostly based on what I've read scientifically, is the conditions that are provided for life to exist on this specific planet. It's highly likely that they can be replicable in a place far, far away. If another planet is near another form of energy, it's highly likely, right? Yeah, but also the question of intelligence and identifying intelligence and identifying life is, if say an alien came to Uganda, for example, it's highly unlikely that we will notice that an alien has come to Uganda, right? Because again of the nature of how we are biased to understand sort of life, how we are biased to understand intelligence and things like that. For example, the branch thing, I know, for example, the Chitoke stem, if you're going to plant it somewhere, you can get it from the village, take it on your car, plant it the next day, in the soil and the matoke will grow, right? So that form of life is different from Chester. If you cut off Chester's head, you're not getting that Chester back, right? But okay, maybe science again. The doctors can put it back. I don't know, but yeah, if Chester is disconnected from its life form, it's not brought back, right? While for plants it's possible. So aliens, okay, I assume this is just two variants of a multitude of things that could happen, right? But one thing I know that's special about Earth, say if an alien that is the way we think, we feel a little bit more intelligent than dogs, right? Where we can look at dogs and observe their patterns and say, oh, if you give this dog meat today and tomorrow with a bell, for example, if you give the dog meat and a bell, when you ring the bell, it will salivate expecting meat, right? If the intelligence we have to the extent that we can identify things like that, if you scale it to a bigger level and say, there are bees and being, that is more intelligent than humans, at a level that humans can comprehend, the way dogs can comprehend human beings.
Yes.
Then the thing that sort of intelligent being will be able to identify as a pattern about humans is the ability to tell stories. Yeah, and for me that's the same category I put God, right? When you, for example, when you look at, this one will sound a bit. I'm black, I can't be racist. This is going to sound racist. But when you look at sort of the hierarchy of races, right, people's origins from, modern history, right, you find that once upon a time people in Africa were conquered and colonized. I think colonized is the right word, sort of their culture was abused and taken away and replaced by another culture, right? But if you compare the difference between these two cultures, it's the stories they tell each other, right? So the white man comes with the Bible and the story of this supreme being, right? And the black man who has never actually been exposed to such a story is convinced. It's a very convincing story, right? Oh wow, this adds up, this makes sense. I was wondering, where do I come from? And this guy has a very clear answer, right? And so on and so forth, right? So I think the difference between the colonization of Africa and the colonization of Asia is Asia retains all its culture because Asia has a superior story, right? The Buddha story, the meditation we're talking about right now. When it comes to meditation and saying, oh, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. Buddha, the actual Buddhism, the religion, has a concept of reincarnation, right? So you as you, it's not your first life, basically, right? It could be your last life if you're Buddha, but chances are extremely high that, once upon a time, maybe you were a dog. So for them, they have an origin story that is grounded, right? So if you bring this creator guy with a white beard in the sky, it's not going to be very convincing because they have a similar story that's more persuasive, right? And so the thing about that unites humans is not just the fact that we're intelligent. I think dogs are intelligent. They sort of can follow a pattern. But what makes humans special is ability to tell stories, right? And most of my meditation experience was, I don't know, I'll probably share that book with you actually if you haven't read it. Dan Ingram's book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. That's actually the title of the book, yeah? In Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, he's emphasizing that the point of you sitting is just sitting, the Zen way, right? The point of you sitting is not to get enlightened. It's not to be alive. It's not to get supernatural powers. He's actually one of those meditation teachers who believes in magic and mysticism and all that. He says that's not the point. The point is for you to sit, breathe in, breathe out, and while you're breathing while you're breathing in, know that I am breathing in. And while you're breathing out, know that I'm breathing out. And his theory, I would say theory because I think that's the basis of his classes, is when you just do simply that, at some point it's going to be inevitable for you to know the truths of whatever this is, right? They're going to reveal themselves to you. So you'll know, first of all, I think his basis emphasis, like the entry level to getting enlightened, it's the fourfold path, the Buddhism fourfold path. Yeah, so it's a cause and effect, right? As long as you get to a point where it's natural to you to know this is because of this and this is because of this, there is cause and there is effect, then you're becoming a Buddha, right? And then I think the second part or third part, I'm not sure about the path anymore. Again, as I've told you, it's been a while since I did that. But yeah, so the path theoretically, when you get to a place of arising and passing away, where you can now tell that you can sort of know impermanence. It's not a story anymore. It's when you breathe or when you close your eyes to meditate or when you just live, you know that you're living. When you're standing, you know that you're standing. When something is itching, you know that something is itching you. Basically, you know for sure that things arise and they pass away. It's also very hard to explain. It needs like people like him who have talked for a while to explain it. But when you get to that point where you don't tell yourself stories anymore, you sort of understand from I failed to get a word. You just understand things. Yeah, so when you get to that point, that's when things you're ready now to I forget what they, so you're ready for Buddhahood basically. So again, there's a story there about the goal of your meditation, right? And for him, the book is called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, is to become like the Indian guy who sat under a tree, right?
Yes.
Is to become the Buddha, where you're fully enlightened and where you're sort of everything and nothing. Well, basically what the Christians call a God. Yeah. But again, if you, from my perspective, right? If you read, say, the Bhagavad Gita, that one. When you read that Indian book, right? You come and read the Christian's book. You read Muhammad's book as well. If you start reading these, you start to notice, right? And you read Sigmund Freud. Yeah, you know that European guy who thought everyone wants to have sex with their mother. If you read if you read all that stuff, yeah, the one thing you understand is, first of all, most of these guys are almost trying to say the same thing, right? There's that mystery about the mind, what you call the subconscious. There's that thing about the mind that does not appear to you, the person, right? So I'm sitting here, how can I say? The same way you sort of, you know that the mind knows a lot more than you know it does, right? For example, you're surprised in your dream that, the mind knew that this is the time you woke up, or, this is why you left the chair. Things you don't initially keep a list of, things like that. And most of what this work is about, most of the mystical work is about, is figuring out a formula to make that conscious, to sort of make more of what we consider to be the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind more conscious, right? So that's one way, that's sort of a perspective to look at this, right? The other perspective is science. Get the guy's brain out, or put him in that machine that sort of can pick up on brain signals, look at how the neurons are playing around, and try to draw patterns. Say, when the guy smiles, this place lights up. When the guy is sad, this place lights up. Maybe this place is in charge of smiling, or this place is reacting to smiling, basically, yeah. So draw a map of what happens, what we call the mind, but in terms of electronics, how would you represent the mind electronically, right? So that's another version. And in this case, you start to realize that the brain never sleeps, right? Right now, you think, so for example, right now I think I'm talking, but what I'm actually doing is talking, is breathing, is digesting, is sort of killing cells, bringing cells. The brain is literally actively doing all that, right? So that is the nature of the organ itself, yeah? And I'm also telling stories, right? And the thing about these two versions of these two perspectives is you start to realize even this, the technical bit that you think can be graphed and put in numbers, you can sort of say measure the brightness of the way the brain sparks when something happens, to sort of know the intensity, something that you think can be expressed totally in a formal language like mathematics. You start to realize that this is also a story, right? This is also a story. When, for example, physics is probably the most hard science of all sciences, right? When Newton makes his predictions and writes his formulas, you start to think, oh, this guy has figured out how the world works, right? But when things become more complex, say, at subatomic level, we start to make up numbers. If you look at physics is full of constants. Planck's constant, even Newton has that gravitational constant. It's full of numbers that are just not explained anyhow, but they complete the story. So we don't know why our assumptions here don't matter, but if you add Planck's constant, then it adds up.
So again, it's just a human invention. We're completing the story that way. And then you just understand, for me, that's how I understand that. The thing that differentiates human beings from all other forms of intelligence is our ability to tell stories. Yeah? And the question of aliens that I asked is, if we get to a place where we find other forms of life that have a form of communication that's similar to ours, a form of storytelling, where they sort of can mobilize, for example, Bobby Wine, you want to take power, you mobilize and tell these stories about things, and so people feel like, even if I don't know the guy, I feel like, oh, I relate, because the story speaks to me. Sort of like I'm a human being, my mind is basically this machine that processes stories, right? And so you feel like I relate. And for me, this is sort of where all of this goes. And I mentioned, you asking, I think, the question of why did I stop? At some point, I figured out the story. Like, I think that's, for me, how I understand this, I sat down, meditated, listened to what people are saying, and for me, what makes sense to me is, even when I don't know that I'm meditating, I am meditating, right? Say mindfulness, I think there's extreme value in mindfulness. I love the book, by the way, I would recommend it to everyone, but what I sort of think is important to highlight is there's nothing mysterious about anything, basically, right? Mindfulness, sometimes, even when you don't, so mindfulness is like reading. If you read a lot, you can learn how to read faster, you can learn how to be more comfortable reading. It's just something as mindfulness. If you put your mind to it, if you say this is a skill I want to achieve, you can live your life being more mindful, right? But the argument that is a better state of life than a person whose mind is wandering, that is yet to be made, right? Sort of, that is not, for me, very convincing either. And so I think that at some point, the most important story, right? From what I've learned from meditation, first of all, is what I would disagree with entirely is the idea of free will. That doesn't exist, right? It's just a complex layers of cause and effect, random cause and effect that sort of bring what we consider to be free will, right? That's where I would disagree. The other place where I think, so most of the stuff I agree with, right? There is definitely, you become happier if you're more mindful. Okay, from my experience, you become happier if you're more mindful, but you become less safe. So in a world where you're surviving, and this is why also most of this culture of meditation, if you look in the West, it's mostly for people who are well off, right? Or people who are in their later stages of life. Because first of all, if you don't know where you're going to get your lunch, or if you're in the middle of the forest and the lion can eat you, evolutionary, your brain is better off. What? Your mind, monkey mind, that is much better off, so you can try to to think through all the stories of what I would do if the lion came, what I would do if what I would do to get food. Your mind think about small things randomly, moving from one thing to another randomly, is more productive in that state than a mind that is settled on one thing, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, because then the lion is going to eat you. Yeah? Unless, of course, you're good and you don't care about these things. But, technical as a human being, as an animal, yeah, you need a wandering mind to survive. To thrive, when you're at that point where, where you're 7, you've hired the whole army to protect you, you know that your life is safe. At that point, your one enemy is what is coming from your mind, right? And at that point, there is extreme value, more than mind wandering, because you've hired all these people to wander for you. There is extreme value in sitting down and breathing in and breathing out to sort of get your mind aligned. Yeah. So again, that's I don't know if all this makes sense, but that is sort of where I am. Yeah. And that's why I asked the question of the aliens, right? And so now I'm going to ask again the third or the second question. The second one was the planets, right? The third question is the idea of God. Yeah. Do you imagine God as a being beyond humans or as a creation of humans? And sort of, how do you see these two perspectives, right? One, God as a story I made up, made that to sleep well at night when there's nothing else I can do, or God as an external thing out of me that, well, I don't know how to think about that other version, but I think you get the picture.
I do. That's a very packed question. Oh my. Okay. So I wanted just to address a few things that you had mentioned. I think if I was to sum up what you were saying, you were looking at one part being the path of meditation, but meditation in terms of meditation with a spiritual practice. And on the one hand, or on the other hand, you're looking at it in terms of science and the answers that it has given and the many questions that it has posed as well. I'll say this. I think, and this is something, now I understand why you said you stopped meditating. The way that our minds are made, all these things that we think about, all these things that we're thinking about, a mind is built in such a way that your thoughts will continue to move from one thing to another, and in many instances until there is no end. Now, why are you punishing your mind in that manner? By thinking of things that perhaps, before you go out to search for aliens, have we understood why we are? Have we understood the questions I asked you before, going back to the simplicity of the breath, going back to the complexity and simplicity as well of emotions, of an emotion like love? Do you understand what love is? Okay, if you were going...
I'll explain that later.
So going back to what you were saying, if you were looking at it from the scientific angle, talking about pheromones and all these hormones and everything else, but none of those things is conclusive. And I think the more that your mind tries to understand these things, the more that your mind asks all these questions, sometimes you get away from what I would call the truth. You see, I mentioned this at the beginning, that religion is a philosophy and faith is its substance. Now, bringing that home, especially with what you asked, meditation has nothing to do with Buddhism. Meditation has nothing to do with Christianity, has nothing to do with Hinduism, has nothing to do with all these things. Meditation, as I mentioned, is just the act of paying attention, the act of stopping. Now, when you focus on your breath, we did that exercise where we focused on the breath. In those few seconds that we did that, you and I agreed that there was a difference from, if you were not paying attention to your breath in that manner. Now, if you reduce, and I use the word reduce on purpose, meditation to just focusing on your breath, you will, one, remove all these other aspects, all these other things that perhaps take you away from something that has the potential to change your life. The things I teach about meditation, the things I write about meditation, the things that I have experienced myself. And looking at the cause and effect that you were talking about, the act of me breathing in and breathing out, that paying attention. You use the example that meditation is perhaps for the rich or for the old, but in every tradition and in every society, we have seen the Bible talks about in Mark 1:25 how Christ retreated to go and meditate. When they talk about prayer, in most instances, they talk about prayer, or we talk about prayer in a manner that will allow you first to withdraw so that you're able to concentrate and focus. In school, and in anything that you do, concentration is important for you to be able to finish what you're doing and for you to be able to achieve the purpose of what you have started. Now, you cannot tell me that act of concentration is bad. You cannot tell me that non-concentration is more beneficial than concentration. When you sit and meditate, and this is something as well that perhaps many people misinterpret, meditation is not about stopping your thoughts. Meditation is about sitting with your thoughts. It's about observing your thoughts. It's about making peace with yourself, making peace with these thoughts. And the more that you do that, the more that you, again, question the nature of things and look deeper into things like thoughts, the more you start to see that there's an observer looking at these thoughts. And this observer can be free of the mental chatter. Now, for you, perhaps you have a control or you're comfortable with how far your mind races. But many of these diseases that we get today, depression, bipolar, all these conditions all relate to how the mind sometimes can run away from the person who, if I sat here like with the question that you asked, if I was not paying attention, it would be difficult for me to answer the question, the questions that you have asked. So attention is something that I would recommend to anyone, and remove anything spiritual from it, just the act of paying attention. Now, in my book, I say that meditation supplemented by spiritual practice. Again, that's on purpose, because we're looking at meditation on its own, we're looking at spiritual practice on the other. Living in societies requires you to be able to, in order for you to live comfortably with your neighbors, you have to have rules. You have to have codes of conduct, ways that will allow you not to not to live in a manner where it is impossible for you to know that if I go to sleep, I'll be able to wake up in the morning without someone slitting my throat or something as dark as that. And so, if you then look at spiritual practice in the manner that would allow you to be able to live a life that is, I want to use the word ethical, in a manner that would allow you to see the suffering of others the same way you see the suffering in yourself. That makes you a better person to be able to communicate with, a better person to be able to live with. And that's why meditation goes with spiritual practice. Now, there are certain religions or traditions that have made meditation as popular as it is. Traditions, as we mentioned, like Buddhism. Now, Buddhism teaches about the four, about the path. And this is something, again, I just wanted to highlight to our listeners or viewers. At one, the path is that suffering exists. Suffering is caused by our mental formations. All these things that we're talking about, how your mind will keep going from one thing to another. That suffering can be stopped by looking into its nature, which is that suffering is suffering. And number 4, that you can continue to stay on the path that will allow you to be able to free yourself of suffering. And that path then leads to what the Buddhists call the Eightfold Path, which is right view, right thinking, right mindfulness, right diligence, right concentration, right action, right speech, and right mindfulness. These are the same way the Buddhists talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, the same way in Christianity we will talk about Moses and the 10 Commandments. Do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not steal. All these are, again, they are rules and tools to allow human beings to be able to live properly in societies where we're able to cooperate rather than tear each other apart. And so, again, going back on all those things that you have mentioned, if I reduce them, the reason why we are here sitting, talking, and I can answer your questions is because I understand what you're saying. We have the gift of language. Now, again, going back to what causes us to speak in the manner that we speak. What causes us to interpret the information that you give to me in the manner that I have interpreted it. Those are things that even though science tries to explain many of these things, you end up having more questions than answers. I tell you that the reason why mindfulness or meditation is so powerful, it allows you to stay in the present moment. Staying in the present moment allows you to enjoy what you're seeing here. You say there's nothing special about this galaxy among the things that you have mentioned. But Kenneth, if there was nothing special about this galaxy, then why are you still alive? Now, all those questions, perhaps if you now thought deeper into where all those feelings come from, you start to see that perhaps you connecting meditation to mysticism, connecting meditation to all these other religions is what takes you away from the simplicity of meditation. It's also what takes you away from the simplicity of questions such as, how have I come to be? How have my thoughts come to be? How does everything that exists come to be? And how can it not be if it were not for a guiding hand? You gave the example of a dog. Again, sometimes I think as human beings, our perceptions and our senses confuse us and sometimes can take us away from the truth. We think that what we see or that everything stops and starts with the mind. We think that just because we can see things, that what we're seeing is exactly what it is. But all those things, we're seeing them based on our designation. And we're all seeing them because we all have the same eyes, in a sense that our eyes operate with the same science, with the same biology, with the same things. Now, outside of that, that's why when you asked me that question about aliens, I said, I do not know. Because the same way I do not know for a fact that dogs do not perceive the world perhaps in a manner that would make them enjoy this world more. I can only focus on me. I can only focus on my feelings. I can only focus on my emotions. I can only focus on my breath. And in doing so, again, I simplify my life. Meditation is something that has the potential. It's a tool that has the potential to change your life. And these are things we write about, but things that I have experienced. And many people have experienced that as well. And I've given you the exercise. When you just breathe in and out, in those few seconds, does that feel better than when you're stressed to angry and inundated by all these thoughts? I'd think that's a much better life and all that. But beyond that as well, meditation gives you the tools that in the midst of storms, that when Christ was on that boat and all the disciples were worried about the storm, Christ was calm. That particular scripture or piece of scripture teaches me that meditation does not exist just in sitting by yourself. Meditation should be something that you take into your day-to-day life, that with all the storms of life, you should be able to calm down and breathe and be able to accept things as they are. And in that manner, you're able to live a life that is free of all this worry, that is free of all this delusion. And that doesn't mean, I say, that because I meditate or because meditation exists, that you're not affected by all these things that happen. No, far from it. Meditation, as I've said, is a tool that allows you to exist and to be happy in spite of or despite all those different things that would seek to make you sad, that would seek to kill you.
I see. Yeah, so first of all, I agree a lot with what you say, right? And I think for me, where I throw the sort of differing line is a moment of survival versus a moment of thriving, right? Breathing, the exercise we did before, that is great. I try to do that many times whenever I remember, right? But when someone points a gun to my head, yeah, that is not an effective exercise in any way. Yeah, in fact, my chances of survival are higher if I let my mind wander in panic, right? If I let, okay, so there's okay, I think there are things they confuse. There's a stoic thing of looking calm, right? So if I can pull off that stoic thing of looking calm, because the mind, again, you can't control it, right? Yeah, and let the mind panic the way it wants, instead of, forcing it to pay attention to one specific thing or so sort of, okay, so this is, again, maybe let's also first reconcile how we understand meditation, right? So meditation, for me, I understand it in three things, right? You're cultivating three things, basically. Concentration, which is something we emphasize a lot, but also wisdom, right? And wisdom, most traditions call it insight, right? The ability to know, not just to concentrate, but to know. So I know for sure that when you do the deep concentration, when you go into those deep jhanas, when you do that deep concentration exercise, it sort of feels like, okay, for me, I compare it to weed. When I used to smoke weed, it used to feel like that. It sort of gives you that height, right? But then there is the inside part, yeah, that's a little bit more challenging, but it keeps you alert. It's sort of, you know for sure, you're not buzzy in any way. It's not cloudy in any way when you're doing insight. So most of I think the tradition is by Sayadai, I think, the one of labeling. So it's basically try to label, basically focus your mind on labeling things that come to your mind, yeah? And in a way, you start to, I think, naturally to just draw patterns or whatever. Okay, I don't know how it works, but it's a practice that I've done, and it helps me, first of all, focus a little bit more. But it also, it's sort of, you learn a little bit, the meditation exercise also is a learning experience for you, right? And there are those two, right? And the third is morality, mostly, I think the Eightfold Path, act right, basically, right? That's the third part of meditation. That's how I was taught this, right? But I'm thinking of, so day to day, if, say, for example, every Sunday I play football, right? On the pitch we play about maybe 11 a side, yeah? an average of 11 aside, say maybe 22 people, sometimes less, sometimes more. Among these 22 people, about say 6 of these people, say 3 from each side, don't know whether they'll get a meal after that match. They just don't know that for sure, right? And about on those, okay, say, yeah, okay, maybe 8 of those, of the 22 people, yeah? So 6 among those 8 don't know whether they'll get a meal, but the other 2 know they can afford a meal, but they would prefer to use that money either to buy drugs or to buy alcohol, right? So it's their priority is not what I would consider to be a priority, right? Yeah, so they want to worry about whether they'll eat only if they've had some either weed or something harder in them or some alcohol, right? So for these people, yeah, they have a clear idea of a state of mind that will make them happy, right? It's not confusing at all, yeah? So for me right now, I'm sorted. My lunch, supper, and breakfast is sorted. In fact, I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm even trying to stay away from the food, right? Right now, I don't know what immediately will make me happier, right? So the argument that if I sit down and just try to listen to my mind, right? Let my mind tell me this and this and this and let things come and let things go. That concept, I see how it can make me happy because I don't yet have a clear idea of what exactly happiness means to me, right? But the guy who needs to eat needs his mind to be thinking about how many ways food can come to his table.
Actually, may we try to unpack that before we even move forward? You keep saying that when there's a situation that happens, you need to first sit. I don't know why. Because meditation does not mean that in any situation you first sit, you first tell people, life first stop.
Yeah.
It's now time for my mind to first think about what to do in the midst of, as you said, someone pointing a gun to your head. In all those scenarios that you have mentioned, if someone is pointing a gun to your head and you're thinking about food and you're thinking about death, will that help you in that moment? Is that what you're saying, Kenneth?
I'm saying, in that moment, you want your mind to go as much as you want. So again, my assumption here is, you don't have, and I think we have done this, right? You don't have much control on what your mind is going to think about, right? You can consciously attempt to, most of concentration meditation is like that. You can consciously attempt to point your mind to something. Yeah, so I think the basic class of mindfulness, okay, the one I learned again, and I know you teach of this, but the one I learned is mindfulness basically is remember when you're not paying attention, right? So say, for example, you're supposed to pay attention to the sensations of the breath of the nostrils, right? At some point, the mind is going to go away because the mind doesn't care about what you want. The idea of mindfulness is to remember, just know that, I was supposed to, when you catch yourself not listening to those nostrils, those sensations, you're like, I was supposed to do this, right? And I think part of what so there's a concept in machine learning called reinforcement learning, where you sort of reward the machine for doing the right thing. And so the way I was also taught is, at that point when you catch yourself, instead of being sad, which is the natural way to be like, oh shit, I'm a terrible meditator, it's be happy, reward your mind for remembering. And the idea, I think, is that to encourage your mind to remember more, sort of like the concept of reinforcement learning is like that.
Actually, may I reward my mind because I just remembered somewhere in between where you spoke about the football team and someone not eating. May I try and answer that first? Okay. So, if I don't have anything to eat, how will it help me to worry or to overthink about me not having something to eat? It helps me to think about how to get something to eat, not to worry about the fact that I don't have something to eat. And I think that's where we need to have clarity over that.
I see. So okay. In a scenario, so let me tell you this, as from my work, right? Maybe this is actually more relatable to me than feeding. Sometimes there is a bug in the machine, right? So building software for people, there is a meeting in 2 days' time, and there's somewhere memory is leaking. So every time I run my program, the computer runs out of RAM, right? And it doesn't make any sense. So the computer is not doing any heavy work. It's not reading big files or whatever. But you just don't know why the computer is running out of RAM, right? You sit down on your computer, you read all the code that gets executed. You can't figure it out, right? The clear path of how do I get something to eat, those you've exhausted. As a developer, you have a list of things you check. Let me check this, let me check this, let me check this. You can't add more RAM because the guy who pays for the RAM thinks that's more than enough RAM that you should need, right? And at that point, if you're going to make sure that the people who are going to use the software in a specific, say, high-profile thing, where your reputation and your software's reputation is at stake, you have nothing to do but to worry, right? It's you cannot obviously be. You can try to do them, and I've tried this again. I think of myself. I used to think of myself as a very, very strong meditator. Right now, I would say I'm out of practice, so not so much. But even then, when there is a genuine reason to worry, you worry.
Of course. Yeah. Look, even before you finish that line of thought, meditation does not make you a robot.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you lose feelings, where you lose sensation, you still worry. But the question I asked, and this is where meditation helps, with the fixation on worrying. And that's where I'm saying that fixation on something never made it better. The Bible talks about how if the birds of the air, are able to go about their lives freely, then ultimately, what will it help you to worry? Will it add more years onto your life? Worrying, what it does is it takes away from your life instead. And that doesn't mean that in me saying that I will never worry. My issue is the fixation on worry. When you fixate on a particular emotion, let's say sadness, if you fixate on sadness, chances are you will stay in that state because the brain is doing everything possible to do what you want, which is that I want to be sad. I want to worry. But if you look at worrying as just worry in the sense that I don't have something to eat, I'm worried I don't have something to eat. Then focus your mind then on thinking, how do I get something to eat? So you're packing so many things into
okay, just interrupt me. Sorry, for me, the thing is, I'll just keep talking if you don't. Yeah,
because
it's okay. It's okay.
Like there were many things we could have spoken about, which are good things like the free will. Yeah,
we definitely. Everything I'm going to bring it back. Right. I just wanted us to first.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, I wanted to first reconcile what I understand meditation to be.
Okay.
That is sort of. I think it's important, so we talk about the same thing. The other thing I wanted to first of all express what I think is the important advantages and why it's exaggerated. Right. That's one thing. That's the second thing. And part of what I wanted to do, I haven't treated on this yet, but I also want to talk about mental illness as part of the sort of, because you hinted on that.
Yeah. Actually, if I could go back to that exaggeration, Ken, the narrative, for example, has been that, in the past, and this is something you alluded to earlier, let's say, if I make a generalized statement and say that all black people are dumb, or I say that all human beings have the propensity to be stupid. Now, those are two very powerful statements, two very separate statements, but ultimately, the problem with generalization is that you do not factor in the the reality of things.
I totally agree.
Now, meditation has very, very many forms. Meditation, think of meditation like sport.
Yeah.
You can play tennis, you can play cricket, you can play badminton, you can play rugby, you can play American football. Many of those will have a variable, which is, let's say, you're playing with a ball. Others will have another similarity or something that will basically be where the sport will be formed around that particular object. Now, meditation works like that. The meditation that I am teaching, the meditation that has changed my life is mindfulness meditation, which is the act of just paying attention. In all those examples that we're speaking about earlier, my answer will still be that I will stand a higher chance of either surviving a dangerous situation or of being happier if I'm paying attention to what's happening. If I'm paying attention to someone who is threatening my life, chances are I'll be able perhaps to see their body movements that allow me to be able to make calculated decisions. Should I move? Should I stop? Maybe if I'm paying attention, I'll see that the gun that is holding to me is a dummy or is a prop. But how will I do that if my mind is thinking and not giving me an opportunity to be able to focus and pay attention? If you go into brainwave states, the reason why we have different brainwave states, which a brain or human being possesses simultaneously rather than just one first and then this or the other, is to prove exactly what I have just mentioned. You have the beta state, which allows you to concentrate because that's that state that's the most awake. And then you have the alpha state, which is lower than the beta state and allows you to concentrate even further. And then you have theta, which is sleep or meditation. And then you have delta, which is the deepest state, and that's a state when you're deeply sleeping. These brainwave states confirm that things are at an optimum level in one of those states. It's difficult for you to have the same concentration or attention that you would have in the alpha state than if you were in the delta state. In the delta state, most likely you'll be sleeping or you'll be totally detached from this world. And so the fact that you have all these brainwave states operating simultaneously confirms to me that if you look at meditation in the light that, one, you're stopping. Stopping does not mean first stopping and then you, as I said before, you let everyone fall into line. No, it's the act of stopping your thoughts, but not stopping your thoughts as well. Actually, I should retract that, because whenever we talk about stopping thoughts, we lose the effect of what meditation does. The act of stopping means that I just try to align. We all need to, even in life, you stop in this podcast. We had to correct the mic at a certain point. If you continue with the mic the way that it was, chances are that although we shall speak, all this will be for nothing. Because ultimately the end result is that it's not tuned in a manner that would be listened to by the people who want to listen to it. So that allows you, now, in this same practice, the things that here, sitting here with you, we've had to stop and say, okay, can we move the mic here? Can we do this? Why do we do that?
Yeah, to improve. Okay, so I see. Okay, so one thing, right, that one thing that's real, whenever you're awake, you're paying attention, right? It's just that, again, how I understand meditation, and you're right, there are multiple versions, right? But I think the sort of the version that I'm talking to is the version you teach, right?
Mindfulness meditation.
Yes. How I understand mindfulness, actually, so the way I've been taught is mindfulness just a skill you need to meditate, basically, right? So cultivating it obviously has multiple values, but it's a skill you need to meditate. And as I mentioned, meditation is, for me, the way I learned it is you have to be cultivating wisdom as well, you have to be cultivating concentration, and you have to be cultivating morality as well, right? But when you wake up, it's just a natural thing for your brain to do, to pay attention, right? It's just that people who meditate, so attention also is a very funny, peculiar thing, right? Think of you paying attention to your teacher, right? A teacher teaching. You paying attention to the teacher as one thing, right? But think of you paying attention to your teacher as another thing. I'm going to call that awareness. So that's sort of the lingo, right? Knowing at a certain point that I am now talking, right? Compared to talking. So actually, action is a different thing. So the thing that requires active work, usually, it's being aware that you're doing it can distract you, right? But most of the passive things, like breathing, so you don't breathe usually, breathing just happens to you, right? So like breathing, being aware that your breathing sort of relaxes you a little bit more, because it's mostly a passive thing. It's very hard for you to choose. You can intentionally choose not to breathe, but most of the times when you're paying attention to other things, breathing will happen, right? And so what I think, what I'm considering meditation in this case to be is the cultivation also of that thing, of that knowingness, right? I think you hinted on the observe a bit, but that has to go there when we are ready, when we have the same thing, right? So knowing that moment of, cultivating the moment of, I know what I'm doing at the moment, right? Sort of that's what I consider to be mindfulness, and I think, let me know if you disagree with that.
Yes, mindfulness is being aware of everything that's around you.
Exactly.
But being aware does not, you also don't overthink being aware.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. So being aware would mean in this case that I'm thinking about food. I know that I'm thinking about food, right?
That's it.
Exactly, because at some point you'll be thinking about food and you salivate because you're not just aware that. Yeah. So in this case, a mindful person would be the person who's thinking about food, who knows that they're thinking about food, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, and my example with surviving versus thriving is, first of all, even for the Buddha, the brain has to obey rules of physics, right? And energy is not infinite. So the brain has a limited amount of energy it can use. Okay, so I'm also making the assumption that you believe that the brain is the main actor when it comes to the mind.
To the mind?
Yeah.
Yes, to the mind.
Yeah. Yes, the mind. Yeah. Okay.
And I like how you said main actor. That means there are other actors.
True. So okay. And the reason I'm saying that is your brain, right, still has a limited amount of resources. You have a limited amount of glucose. The processes that sort of process this glucose to bring it to the brain also have a limited amount of ways they can do it. It can't be infinite. It can't be instant. A person who has an immediate problem, the brain cannot just magically know everything, right? There's sort of some limitations to it, right? And what the reason I'm bringing this up is a person who, say for example, is on a gunshot, right? This person clearly knows that my highest priority is to live in the next moment, right? That is known. Yeah, that's sort of, I think, an instinct. A baby will know when the life is threatened, right? A person who knows that does not need to intentionally dedicate resources, mental resources, to being aware of himself, thinking about how he can survive. You understand? So, Mahai Shing Sahai, I don't know if that's the right way to, the guy of flow. Yeah, basically, I think that's his point. This is what flow is. Flow is the musician does not have to be aware of himself playing music. He becomes one with the music. It just happens at that point. It's not the musician playing music; it's music playing, and the musician is part of the instrument. Right?
Actually, I would want us to talk about that. Does a musician become good just by sitting and playing?
No. That's okay. So those are the things, yeah. And exactly, that's
okay.
A good point, yeah.
So in order for you to be a good musician, you must practice.
Yeah.
And before you become one with the music, you must first go through particular steps. If you have, in all the scenarios that you have given, if I am running away from a lion, there's the same examples that you have given. Who stands a higher chance? Someone who has been exercising and who is fit, or someone who just woke up and decided, I'll just walk into this park and accost this lion.
Yeah. Okay.
I can go on and on with all these examples. What meditation allows you to do, and when they talk about paying attention, the paying attention at a certain point becomes you. There is no difference. That's the non-duality that I was telling you about. You are your thoughts are you. In that moment, if I was speaking to those particular scenarios, meditation would allow you, one, not to focus on other things, but to concentrate on where you are. Now, that doesn't mean that your mind at that moment will be, okay, I'm seeing myself thinking of me attacking this person or me running away. No, that in my mind is misunderstanding of what meditation does, of what mindfulness is. The effect, it is the cause and effect that the more you practice focusing on your breath, the more you practice watching your thoughts, the more that you become in tune or attuned to your body, and you balance yourself. Now, balancing yourself, living in that flow state, allows you to react faster to situations. So the effect is that meditation, in essence, will perhaps help you to survive better than anything else. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, so I agree. Yeah, and maybe I think, I'll concede this one. So yeah, meditation as a practice, right, over a long time, obviously will make you a better person. Right?
Yes, it's habits. You see, from when you're a child, your brain, as I told you, your subconscious is picking up all these things, right? All this chatter. I gave you that example before about how I liken the subconscious to artificial intelligence. Now, in real scenarios, you need to be calm. You need to be sharp, in the sense that your brain needs to be able to work in a manner that would allow you to survive situations that would ordinarily kill you. And that practice forms a habit. That habit, in turn, the fruits of meditation are the ones, as I mentioned, that you're calmer, you're able to respond to situations differently. It allows you to be able to have clarity. Now, building that habit, it requires you to train. The same way you train if you're exercising, the same way you train if you are, in order for you to become a good scientist, to become a good teacher, to become a good lawyer, a good doctor, all those require you to practice. And practice, it's no different from meditation. It is no different.
No, so first of all, as I said, I think that I can't counter that. So first of all, maybe I misunderstood, or maybe we separated these two conversations. What I was attacking was meditation, was sort of that mindfulness thing as a quick mental fix, right? So for example, the breath thing we did. Right?
Actually, let us look at that. Mm-hmm. You're saying, and this is, I'll answer and say yes, meditation or focusing on the breath can be a quick mental fix. That in the midst of you being angry, if you just took a moment to breathe, in that very moment, I'm talking about those seconds when you're breathing. Forget about the minutes or the hours that go after. Mm-hmm. The truth is, you are realigning your body, you're recalibrating your senses, and perhaps that would then stop you from doing something that you'd regret, like punching someone in the face. So what meditation allows you to do is to learn the art of just being in flow state. That's the effect, as I mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. So, two things, right? When you're angry, and you're only at the mercy of your actions, right? So it's sort of like you're privileged in a case that you have to choose whether to punch someone or not. It helps to be mindful, so you can choose right? But when you're angry, and if you don't punch the other guy, the guy is going to punch you. It helps that you don't dedicate any mental resources to being mindful, but rather to do the first instinctive thing that comes.
And again, by you saying dedicating mental resources to being mindful, that is looking at it with a wrong view.
No.
If I was in that situation, first of all, if someone was trying to punch me, chances are I would, in understanding one, where I am, and understanding that, the reasons why this person is trying to punch me, I would then want to use the other aspects of my practice, which is morality and concentrated and wisdom, to understand that if this guy is much, much bigger than me, if I try to punch back, what will happen? But beyond that as well, if I also understand that this person is lost, that this person has given in to their anger, perhaps then punching me would be a release. And that's a totally different discussion as regards to how you'd handle situations.
The conversation of, I'm Kenneth, I've been practicing for a long time, and most of this is now a natural consequence. The way I live is now a natural consequence of my practice. That I believe. I think people who meditate, if they do it right, they are generally going to become better people, right? What I don't believe is the mindfulness tricks as a quick fix, sort of like in the scenario you mentioned, right?
Have you tried them?
Yeah, I have. And let me just...
For how long have you tried mindfulness?
I consider myself, I used to consider, okay, now I don't because I've taken a while, but I used to consider myself adept.
Okay.
Adept. I've been in depths when it comes to meditation that very few people even write about, right? But my point is this. My point is, in a situation of privilege where, my day, I have a few moments to spare to practice for meditation, for a goal that I don't see yet, just for myself, for no immediate goal. The only time meditation is helpful, where, say, for example, I wake up, like for myself, I dedicate 15 minutes every day, right? But for you, for example, you have an hour to dedicate. Yeah, there are people who don't have that time to dedicate, right? So in that scenario where I actively cultivate this, right? I know that there's a certain value that I'm cultivating. First of all, I also know I can testify to the value of meditation. So that's an incentive. But for a new meditator, and that's why this man, I tried to get him to meditate, but he has never meditated. The thing is incentive, right? First of all, he has never seen the incentive. He doesn't see anything that has changed in my life because I meditate, because most of it is internal, right? He doesn't see that. Okay, so most of it is internal, but most of the things for me, I sort of consider to be values of meditation. He probably thinks I would have got anyway, right?
Do you see oxygen here?
No, I don't.
Okay, but we agree that there is oxygen here.
Yes.
Is this oxygen beneficial to you?
It is, yes.
So the fact that you don't see it, does it mean that it's not beneficial?
No, it does, because I don't have a choice. I can't sit here and say I don't want to breathe.
Now the
If
reason
it was up to me, I think I would be.
Now, the reason why we teach as well, and that's why learning is important. Learning allows you, one, to remove ignorance, in the sense that you remove what you did not know, and you're taught something that perhaps, in this instance, would change your life. Now, you...
Get this junior guy. Sorry. Let me just get him psychiatrist. Mark, if you get him, tell him to drop the stuff to my what? To the guard. Eh? Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So ultimately, whoever makes a decision not to meditate because they're not seeing the immediate results, why are you impatient? But even beyond that, I'm telling you that scientifically, the act of breathing for 5 minutes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, allows your body to receive more oxygen, and oxygen is good for your body. It's good for your blood, even without looking at the 5 minutes. The fact that you're intentional about breathing in, other than what it does for your mind, let's think about the body itself. Those are benefits. Now, maybe those benefits are not one that you're interested in, but as I've said, your mind has all these things that it has been fed, and it then takes away from understanding that, one, just because I don't see something does not mean that it's not benefiting me. But I'm telling you as well that for me, who has experienced meditation and who is meditating, I have seen the results, one, short term, medium term, and I will continue to see them long term. And if you had continued meditating from the time that you mentioned, perhaps your experience or perhaps this discussion would be different, because then you'd see that consistency in meditation, just like a habit. You mentioned a pitch, that means maybe you're interested in a sport. If you look at footballer will become as great as they are because they practice, because they train. Not for 1 month, not for 2 months, but they'll keep, the more they do it, the better they become at it. That's the same way with this. And when I say becoming better at meditation, it's understanding and using those same tools from the couch. This is something I write about. Meditation is not about sitting on a couch and breathing. It goes beyond that. Sitting on a couch allows you to be able to focus. It allows you to be able to then, as I said, look into the nature of things at a time where you don't have distractions. But mindfulness meditation is in your waking life. It goes into your relationships, it goes into your business, it goes into your family life. You can use those tools everywhere. Let's go to relationships, for example. If I was more mindful in my relationship, if I knew that if I did this, I was going to hurt you, another person who then goes in with mindlessly, doing things without understanding how they'll affect the other person, who do you think will have a healthier relationship?
Yeah, I agree. The guy who's mindful. But so 2 things, right? You talked about ignorance, yeah, which I think is what I was driving to, right? Given the privilege to be convinced of the values of meditation, I would then be willing to dedicate this amount of time, right? But the reason many people, the majority of Ugandans, say for example, don't have a meditation practice, right, is because no one has bothered to give them the sort of left for them this argument. Again, obviously, we're talking about your book, so I appreciate that you dedicated time to writing this book. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, where we are disagreeing was when instead of making that clear, right? No, so you've done that right in your book, right? But I'm saying for most people who peddle this mindfulness thing, instead of making it clear that you can have luck. The one day you do breathing exercises, it will calm you down and you'll pass the interview. That can happen, but that is not a guarantee. In fact, with mindfulness, the more you expect, the more you get distracted from actually minding, right? When you make that clear, that instead of trying to use mindfulness to score this interview, meditate as a practice. It is going to give your life. So it's a very hard thing to say because there is no so you mentioned soccer. I learned, say for example, I would play soccer every day and get better because soccer has clear goals. I go in with my team and we win. We score more goals or we defend more goals, right? And it's clear when we left the pitch where we are missing. Do we need a midfielder? Do we need a defender? Do we need a goalkeeper? Do we need someone to score more goals? Do we need a striker, right? That is very, very clear. When we go, we know how to improve. Meditation, on the other hand, is vague, right? So it's all about balance. Meditation, the thing about it is, if you go again extreme, the thing I was telling you, if you concentrate too much, it's also going to become counterproductive. You're going to just become a little bit high and buzzy, right? So the thing is, how do you sell that balance? Tell someone, sit but don't oversit. Concentrate but know when to what. Basically, because most of this again is very internal. It's very hard to find a good teacher. That's why there are things like labeling. That the thing I was telling you from Mahasi. Yeah, I think Mahasi said died. That's the practice of what of labeling. So there is that, right? That all teachers come up with tricks to trick you basically into calmly focusing, right? Not to intensely focus, not to sort of write meditation by coming up with tricks like that. Listen to the breath, for example. That's also not like a real meditation thing. It's just a trick to teach how to focus, basically. How do you package meditation without coding people, without promising quick fixes, right? How do you package this as a lifelong experience? And as I've told you, because when I was doing that super depth meditation, my goal was to get superpowers, mental superpowers. Because again, this is what I was sold. This is what I was sold. I was told, you come and figure out your mind. When you figure out your mind, you figured out the mind. Basically, you know what the mind is. You become a Buddha and you don't suffer. You've mentioned the fourfold path. Is it the fourfold path? Basically the path of the suffering. Suffering. At the end of the fourth one is the end of suffering, right? And that is ideally what I thought, right? Well, what I was supposed to be preached, what I think that would have made better sense, and if I was to write, say, a book similar, I would emphasize that suffering doesn't end. I would disagree with the Buddha at all, but how you relate to suffering, that changes innumerably when you meditate. Most of what scientifically called neurotics, the neuroses you have, those small things that would get you uncomfortable because of specific things that make you suffer, that would entirely change to the point that you don't sit there worrying that you're going to suffer because suffering is just another form of experience.
Hold on that. The Buddhism teaches 4 truths.
Yeah.
One is that suffering exists. So let's try and unpack those.
Yeah.
Is it true suffering exists?
It does, yes.
Okay. Number 2 is that suffering in most instances, or suffering is caused by particular things. One of those things is suffering can be caused by your mind. How you interpret a situation. What I mentioned, if you're sick, does it help for you to fixate on the fact that you're sick, or to accept that I am sick and focus on getting better? If I don't have a job, does it help for me to stay in bed, sit somewhere focusing on the fact that I don't have a job, or that I should get off my bed, get off my feet and try to go look for a job or try to look for work? So suffering, according to Buddhism, is caused by mental formations, but also caused by things that are one in our control and things that are outside of our control. But the understanding that things are out of your control, that alone, the answer is there. It's out of your control. Does it help you to worry for something that's out of your control? I'd say I'd live a much better life if I accepted that things are outside of my control. The fact that I can get into my car after this interview and get hit by someone. I can only control the fact that I will drive properly and I'll try to concentrate when I'm driving. But those are outside of your control. The third is that suffering can stop. And the stopping suffering is what I just explained before. Understanding that if I stop fixating on the things that continue to cause me suffering, I will have a lot more, not even joy, but I'll have a lot more calmness or a lot more peace. If I understand that because I have no food completely, I should not focus on my hunger. Rather, I should focus on trying to get something to eat so that I can cure my hunger. That will allow me to live a happier life.
I see. Okay.
Now, there's still one more. Now, that then goes to, so the third one is removing the causes of suffering. It's like removing a thorn. If I step on a thorn when I'm walking somewhere, it's going to hurt like hell. But when you understand that if you remove the thorn, I will then get relief from that, wouldn't you want to remove the thorn? Or would you want to continue walking around and try to put plasters all around your thorn? As an example that Martin Singer gives in his book, The Untethered Soul, which is a book that I would really recommend.
What's the name of
It's called The Untethered Soul. The Untethered Soul. It talks about how if you're walking and you step on a thorn, and instead of trying to remove that thorn, you do everything possible to try and make yourself comfortable with the thorn. The fact is, it doesn't matter how comfortable you take, how many painkillers you take, how many numbness drugs you take, or even sitting up elevated, the fact that you still have a thorn in your foot. Now, meditation allows you to see that thorn for what it is, that it's a thorn. That those thoughts that you're calling thoughts, you can make peace and friends with those thoughts, where those thoughts do not lead you to depression, do not lead you to sadness.
Yeah.
Now,
I agree.
the fourth is the cessation of suffering, which is by following the path. And that path I told you. By following a path means that you understand that suffering in its nature is something that is continuous. As long as you're living in this world, suffering will not stop. Not as far as we have seen it. But you can have peace in that suffering. And that's what they mean when they talk about enlightenment. Enlightenment is not something that you should aspire to. Mm-hmm. Enlightenment is something that you receive when you understand the nature of things. That pain exists. I am of the nature to hurt. I'm of the nature to fall sick. I'm of the nature to grow old. I'm of the nature to get angry. I'm of the nature to lose my cool. All these things you're of the nature of. And when you understand them, truly understand them, they lose the power they will have over you. And in that understanding, you cease suffering. You gain or achieve enlightenment. Enlightenment is that peace that you get when you are just in the moment, without worrying about this or that. Now, that, as I've said, that path, that's why I'm saying meditation has to be supplemented or should be supplemented by spiritual practice and things like morality and concentrated and wisdom. To understand that if I continue eating the way that I'm eating, I'm going to continue gaining weight. If I continue eating the way that I'm eating, I'm probably going to die young. That if I'm not focused on building my body, building my my mind, training my mind, or living in that flow state, the chances are I am going to lose my way. It's the cause and effect. And going to the Noble Eightfold Path, as I've said, the four truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. That's why I love Buddhism. Buddhism simplifies things. They're telling you that live with the right view, where you're seeing things for how they are, where you understand that one, suffering exists, and that in order for you to stop suffering, you just have to understand that you're of the nature to suffer. Telling you that you need to live with right thinking, where you're able to articulate yourself and cognize in a manner that will allow you not to do things that would cause you to die, or things that would cause you to hurt, but do things that would grow you, that would enrich you. That's right thinking. Understanding that if I'm in a relationship and I am fighting with my partner, it will not help me to escalate matters by bringing up things that happened 6 years ago. That's not right thinking. Right thinking is getting the knowledge or understanding that, okay, gauging a situation and saying, how do I respond?
So, yeah, okay.
I continue because there are 8.
Yeah.
There were 3.
Right.
You got to write concentration, which means that concentration does not mean, as you are saying, where you allow your mind to go all over the place. It's focusing on one thing. I think in Uganda they say sigala kumulamba, as in where you focus on something. I could have gotten that late.
Are you familiar with kasina practice?
No, what's that?
Looking at the flame, for example. It's a meditation practice where you just start a flame.
Now all those, no, I'm not familiar with that, but all those, the way that you've mentioned it, those are all ways to try and train your senses to be able to stay in flow, for them to be able to concentrate on something. Now, focusing on the breath is a good way to concentrate. I will not concentrate if I want to learn something. If I go to in the middle of a market where there's all that noise and people are pulling me here and there, how am I going to concentrate? Now that's why sitting meditation is important, because you see that you need time where you are by yourself, where you're able to concentrate and hone in, and basically you're able to you're able to calm down, and in calming down you're able to face life's problems as they come at you. Beyond that, as I've said, you have right speech. That the tongue is powerful. The tongue has ability. The tongue has caused wars, has caused world wars, has caused marriages to break. The tongue has caused friendships to go asunder. And that I should watch my tongue and what it says. That's right speech. Going beyond, as I've said, then you're going to right mindfulness. That paying attention, that's where we come in. That paying attention or being mindful does not mean that you're always labeling everything as it goes along. That if I am going to fall into a hole, oh my gosh, I'm falling into a hole. No, that's not right mindfulness. Right mindfulness is looking into the true nature of things, but paying attention in the moment. That practically, the more you meditate, the more you see your mind and your body and your spirit are in sync. That if you're falling into a hole, in that split second, you know, yes, I'm falling into a hole, but you know that I need to grab somewhere perhaps that would be able to save my life. That is a fruit of meditation as a result of you performing or practicing right mindfulness, right diligence. Understanding that sitting for 15 minutes for 2 months will not perhaps allow me to be able to have the tools that will give me life up until I am in my old age. The diligence to understand that meditation requires practice. That practice is not just practice where you just do things but you do things in a manner that other people have taught you, this is what I did and this is what worked. And that's why I'm telling you now that sitting meditation helps. For me, I have done it for maybe about 3 years or so, but in that period of time, I have seen the benefits of sitting. It allows me to align my day. Now, when I go into work, I can be a good lawyer because of that. And I can comfortably say that the meditation has allowed me to practice law in a manner that I had never thought possible. That has allowed me to be a good lawyer, and the results show for themselves. Those are fruits of meditation. I think I have gone through the 8.
I think I get them. I think though that. So first of all, when you put it like that, they seem like a list of the commandments, right? Because when you say right concentration, then it's going to be up to you to define what that right is compared to what my right is.
No. And this is something I don't want to get wrong. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that's why you asked me before why I picked from different sources. Yeah. Perceptions have deceptions, Kenneth. And sometimes we have these perceptions or we have these thoughts about things and we think that what we're thinking about is it or that is right. You must always have the discipline. You must have the wisdom to compare or to be able to analyze the situation, one, based on what other people have done and what is seemingly right in the circumstances. The reason why the Bible is so revered is because that book, when you read it, you see wisdom flowing out of it. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Buddhist, whether you are a Muslim, it does not matter. That when you read the Bible, outside the message in the Bible is a timeless truth. Now, when you pick from those particular truths, from things that have worked. That gives you foundations that will allow you then to pick and to keep moving forward. That is what will make you a better human being, a better father, a better husband. So right concentration is not just getting all those parts are not just you finding your own way. No, finding your own way is being able to read all these other different things and being comfortable in what helps you and what is easier for you as well. In the sense that if it is easier for me to practice mindfulness meditation, then so be it. If it is better for me to practice, is it hatha yoga where you're breathing, good for you. To practice the one where you're focusing on candle flames, and the rest. Again, if the purpose, and that's why we're talking about the cause and effect, if the purpose is to allow you ultimately to achieve the purpose of meditation or mindfulness meditation, which is to gain awareness and to pay attention, then you go with that.
So, right, in this case you're saying is the goal, because again, if this is not defined, if it's left up to the Buddha or up to the Imam or up to the father or up to the Reverend to decide what right thinking is, or to decide what right action is, or that kind of stuff, right? For example, you were questioning whether 15 minutes a day for 2 months is valuable, right? You don't think that's right diligence?
No, I didn't say that. I said right diligence is when you understand that by doing something, the example that I gave, that was just an example of right diligence. That by doing something consistently and diligently, that if I'm sitting and meditating, I'm going to actually do what my teachers have told me, that I should focus on my breath and not just sit because I've called this time meditation hour, that then I just, here I've called it meditation hour, here I have a cigarette, here I have a bottle, and I have friends going around. That's not diligence. You have just, in essence, called that particular period meditation, but you're not meditating. So diligence is actually doing something that you have started out to do. Okay. If you're going to dig in a garden, right diligence is knowing that if I lift my hoe like this and put it down and I pull, I will be doing something, rather than if I'm just swinging my hoe in the air. Is that going to achieve anything in terms of the seeds that you want to plant? And thinking of seeds, that's why those seeds, the seeds are spoken about in the Bible, and those are spoken about in Buddhism and everywhere else, that the seeds of fruits of acting or living in a certain way. Those things that I've mentioned are defined. They're written down. They have existed for years and years, and this is wisdom that has been passed down. Sometimes we think we know all these things. You mentioned this at the beginning that you know. Kenneth, I'm telling you, you don't know. So, none of us knows.
Okay. So my question again is what? This definition, this very vague definition of right. Yeah. And when I practiced, for me, this definition evolved over time. Right? Evolved over time until at a point, right now, where I think right practice is no practice. Right? There is also the tantric.
No, that is a wrong view.
So exactly, who defines it? How do you know it's a wrong view, right? And I'm going to, let me first also hint on this. The tantric version, there is a tantric tradition that claims you're already enlightened. You just need to know it, which is basically mindful, be mindful, right? There's that tantric view, right? And I think the more in-depth you go as a meditator, the more you realize that less is more, right? You need less contemplation, you need less, a lot of that you need to take it away and bear down what you consider to be meditation to just living, right? And the reason I'm saying sort of like the vagueness of scriptures is, again, I tried, when I was meditating mostly, most of my meditation teachers were more circular, as I mentioned. Dasa is a little bit scientisty. Then this Bhate is for him is Buddhist, but it's also the other Hindu Buddhism, I think, rather Hinduism, rather. And then this guy Ingram is an American, considered himself a Buddhist, but most of his stuff is mostly, I think, if mathematics was a religion, that's where I would subscribe, right? And for me, the value for having teachers who think about these things who are not attached to a specific tradition per se, is to listen to when they call onto the tradition, right? Ingram emphasizes those four truths and the path, right? And so when it comes to him teaching about the path in his book, he has to give an opinion of what he considers to be the right path, right? Rather, what right means in terms of right concentration. Yeah, because he's actually good. He's also mysticky. I think he has won competitions of like those focused concentration things, right? He's one of those guys they've put in those EMR machines to see if he can switch some of his body parts off, if he can reduce the rate at which his heart is pumping. Some of those like sports, like sort of mental sports, yeah. But when he's telling you how far is too concentrated, and I wish you had known about Kasina, because now Kasina can make you run mad. Kasina is just looking at the candle flame. If you do it for 24 hours, you start to lose the sense of.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying the difficulty with having. Also, I'm saying the difficulty with having too much information is that you lose your way. It's the same thing if you are reading for an exam, and then you have a physics exam or a math exam, then you're reading biology, and you're reading history, you're reading what? You lose your way, Kenneth. I'm telling you that let us simplify this by talking about meditation, which is the mindfulness meditation, which is the act of breathing in, breathing out. That's one of the tools. Yes. And also...
But also, how we got here is, how do I convince Mark to take up this practice?
The fruits. All those things you're talking about...
Without testifying again.
Hold on, and I try to answer that. You were talking about how do you know this is a wrong view? How do you know this is a right view? How do you know this is right mindfulness? The fruits. If you plant jambula and the tree grows from that and you're able to reap and you get the fruits and you taste that sweet, I don't even know if it's a berry. You taste that sweet berry. You know that you've done the right thing with what you did to plant. You watered it properly, you gave it the right manure, the fruits.
How do you know before the tree grows that you're planting the right way?
Well, of course, now, that's a difficult question to answer, because ultimately, as I've said, many of these tools already exist to give you a starting point. And it's up to you. You see, why many of these other experiences exist, tantric, all these other things, is because the mind and the body have, in every essence, almost limitless potential. That the people that we have seen that can be able to withstand pain in a manner that you cannot be able to understand. That even without looking at those people, women in particular during childbirth, any woman who has given birth will testify as to how painful that is. My wife gave birth and I saw the pain that she was in. Now, it's very difficult to actually, I was watching a documentary the other day where they were saying that pain tolerance is as a result of the hormone estrogen. And they're able to trace that and say that perhaps gives them a higher pain tolerance or threshold for pain. Now, that really, I use that example to show you that as human beings, the possibilities are limitless. There are people who can do so many things because they have concentrated other people, because it has come naturally to them. That's good for them. But if we go talking about all these things, that's having discussions where we're talking about other things. No, I cannot talk about tantric because I have not experienced it. I cannot talk about looking at candles because I have not experienced it. And I'd be lying to your viewers or listeners if I then went into things that I have not practiced. I've practiced mindfulness meditation. And you ask me how will I get Mark or another person to be able to do so?
Exactly. So the point again,
by understanding that, by seeing the fruits in my life. By seeing how
do you get a person who doesn't want to be you?
Okay.
To take up this practice. Yeah, and obviously you're accomplished and all that, but I'm saying a person who thinks their life should take a different path.
You try it. You see, nothing will come of anything unless you first take a step. See, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. That's the same thing. The tools exist. They're there. But the problem is these tools have been, your mind, now you see how your mind can be a dangerous thing. Your mind has put all these other biases and perceptions on this, taking you away from the simplicity, which is paying attention to your breath.
I see. Okay.
That's why thinking is a gift and a curse. thinking allows, and the more you think, there's a book by a monk, very simple book, oh man, I forget, but the monk is called Hainem Sunim. He writes so simply, and he's saying that the more you overthink something, the more that those perceptions that you have in your head continue to form, and they take you away from something that could be beautiful. And I'm telling you that in the simplest form. I gave the example of myself because you're asking me how will I go tell other people to get, to do something. I'll tell them because, as I said, I've experienced it. Now, for them, let them experience. You can't know the true taste of food unless you taste it, Kenneth. So I'll tell you how a burger tastes. I'll tell you how a salad tastes. But your palate is the one that will allow you to be able to taste and know that this food tastes awesome.
I see. Okay. So if you, and the reason I'm emphasizing on this, this is going to be the last part to do this, right? The reason I'm emphasizing on this is because I feel like this could be valuable, if we invested some time in understanding why the majority of people don't meditate. And I'm saying this because I personally have seen the fruits of meditation.
I have an answer to that, even before we go, deeper into that particular discussion. When you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you do, Kenneth?
I usually go to the toilet.
Okay, after you go to the toilet?
Yeah, I do my 15 minutes. That's
Okay.
what I say for my 15 minutes.
Okay, maybe I'll ask a different question. How often are you on your phone?
Okay. I have a discipline around that, but a lot, I see your point, But I've also read books that tell me it's bad.
Now, the world has so many distractions. The society we live in has so many distractions. One, from conversations, where, as I've said, people think that they know, and then you end up misleading other people. Or number two as well, because of all these distractions. We are a distracted generation. That we keep talking about attention span. We are a distracted generation. From when you are a baby, you are now the kids that are, my son, he's coming to 2 years. So I try to limit his TV time, but I still, I still see that in order for him to learn, there are shows on TV that will allow him. Now, if that's the way he's learning concentration by watching TV, oh my, I don't know how he will be when he's 30 or 40 or 50. So because we're a distracted generation, the things that should matter to us, the things that should help us live a better or healthier life, we ignore. They talk about plant-based diets and how those can help you live a healthier life. How many people have the discipline to stick to not eating meat? There are few people that will be able to stick to those things. So there are two things. We're distracted, we don't have discipline. And those two are a dangerous combination. Because if you're distracted, then you're just taking everything that comes. And I already told you the subconscious stores everything. Sometimes we think we're powerful, but not knowing that we are a summation, one of your hormones. Your hormones are the ones that will guide whether you're happy, whether you're sad, whether you go do exercise, whether you do all these things. Now, again, that's why everything works in an ecosystem, in that flow. That in order for you to be able to have your body working at optimum, feed it well, exercise, meditate, where you breathe and you focus and you know that you're breathing in the oxygen that replenishes you. But when you're distracted, and when you don't have the discipline, the fact is you'll have millions of people who do not reap from the benefits of meditation. I'm telling you that anyone who has gotten the benefits of meditation, that's why we teach it. That's why I teach it. Because I have tested of it. And now I'm offering you the plate, Kenneth. It's up to you to refuse it.
I see. Okay. No, I agree. But here's the thing, right? And you're trying to get from what I'm asking, right? You meet a person, for sure, right? Let's say education, right? For sure that people who are educated, they correlate very well with people who the number of people who get educated and the number of people who basically are useful in their elder life, who become successful or become productive in society, that number correlates. The more educated people is direct proportional to the more successful people. Quote unquote success. You know that, right? But you know that a kid in P6, whose father is rich because he made a deal at some container, it's going to be very hard to convince him, that you know, unless your father was a lucky person, right? Unless you're as lucky as your father, chances are that education is an advantage for you, right? So you know the problem. What you're saying is people who don't meditate, they're distracted and they're indisciplined, right? Okay, so again, I know you didn't mean it like in that form, right? You know that. We know that's a problem, right? So
but that's not what I said, though.
Yeah, I know.
I hope the listeners don't think I've said that just because.
That's why I try to emphasize so it doesn't seem like. So the point is, we know the problem, right? We know a solution. We know that, okay, so we know, rather, there are two problems. We know that people who don't get educated, life may not turn out so well for them, right? We know that. But we know that also the other problem is convincing a person that dedicating 10 years of your life, or rather 16 years of your life, to this process with no immediate returns will actually have results, right? It's a hard thing. We know those two things. In a hypothetical world, right? We know those two things, right? So what governments and every, those studied people try to do is, let's try to give them free education, yeah? And then people still don't come. Let's try to give them food at school. And then, you practice, slowly by slowly, you keep attracting a bigger percentage to come to school and test the fruits, what you're saying, I don't know what the burger tastes like from people telling me until I test it, right? So what governments and NGOs and UNICEF are doing is come up with a process that encourages at least more people to come at school, or more people to stay in school, for example, right? What I'm asking is, when it comes to meditation, yeah, what would you consider to be a way to convince a person who hates meditation? Who doesn't meditation? Who doesn't know about meditation? Yeah, who doesn't know about meditation? But who still doesn't want to be you? That this person has seen his father. He wants to be his father. His father he puts on a facade of a content person. His father is putting on a facade of a content person. The person is sold to that, and he knows, I don't care. If I become a drunkard like my father, I see my father what? My father is living the life, basically, right? So you've come with your gospel meditation. What are the specific steps? I think that's what I'm trying to get to.
By showing him. You see, as human beings, usually, not usually. My son, who I have mentioned, is coming to 2 years. He learns by seeing. And now even eating, he won't eat unless he sees you eating. Now, let's use that as some example. If from when he sees me eating, all I'm eating are burgers, all I'm eating is pizza, all I'm eating is all this fried food, chances are, one, if I'm eating that's what's available, and that's what he'll also eat. Compared to if every time he saw me eating a fruit. Now we know for a fact, and this is something that's not about meditation or what, that eating fruits and vegetables give you nutrients that will allow you to be healthy. If he picks up that habit from when he's a baby, doesn't he stand a better chance at life? Now, what I'm going to is that you teach meditation, one, by people seeing the fruits in you. Now, that's, I know, a paradox in itself, because if 90% of the population does not understand or is not interested in many of these things, then how will they be able to learn? But the truth is that 10% perhaps should be the ones that show the fruits. And if I sat here in this podcast and someone picked and said, okay, this must have worked for this person, let me try and see for myself, let me test of this myself, that will cause a ripple effect. I learned from other people. I should have mentioned this earlier. The reason why I started meditating was because I was depressed. I was anxious. And I didn't want to get onto medication. This is my story. And I started meditating the same way you did, 5, 10 minutes, 15, but I stuck to it. And where I am now, it doesn't mean that I don't have days when I get sad, when I get overwhelmed. It happens every day because of the nature of my life. But I have the tools to be able to manage that stress. I have the tools to be able to manage that anxiety. The effect is that I am living a healthier and better life. Whether you like it or not, it's food that I have tasted. Now it's up to you. That's why we had that discussion about free will. Yeah. I don't believe that we live in a universe or in a world that allows you to have complete free will. We live in a deterministic universe, that many things are outside of our control. But the free will is the choice for you to be able to know that even when all these things are outside of your control, I'll choose to do X and Y. You have the choice to eat healthy or not to eat healthy. You have the choice to exercise or not to exercise. And you notice in Kampala, now, COVID is what allowed more people to see the benefits of exercise because they were bored, they were not doing anything. And also on TV, on social media, how many people were running, like on the bypass and everything else. People like to copy. That's human nature. We copy. And in copy now, if you're able to copy positive tools, so be it.
I see. Okay. So we're not going to move on. I was trying to trick you.
No, hold on. I want that question of why a lot of people are not meditating answered.
No, we're going to get to it. We're going to get to it.
There are two reasons. Because one, we are a very distracted generation. We are distracted by so many things. Now gadgets are the ones that distract us. That if I spend half my day on TikTok, if I spend half my day on Facebook, the chances that I will then take that aside and say, let me go take a walk.
Well, people in my father's generation meditating more.
You see, when I say distracted generation, I use gadgets as what's happening now. But distractions have existed from the beginning of time. Politics can distract. There are many societies that have crumbled. The Roman Empire crumbled mostly because of politics. Isn't that a distraction?
Yeah. Alright, so Ken, I was trying to trick you into introducing your book. Here is the thing, right? And I don't want us to do another back and forth on this, but philosophizing, okay, is what brings you to forget about your short-term needs and focus on what? Sort of the more long-term thing, the Marshmallow Test. Well, I don't know if this is the test they did, but they say kids who didn't eat the marshmallow, I don't know if you're part of that test. So they put a bunch of kids in a room, then they give each kid a marshmallow, and then they tell the kid that if whoever eats their marshmallow before the supervisor comes back doesn't get a second one. But whoever has theirs until the supervisor comes back gets a second one. And then the supervisor goes, and the kids wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, and most of them give up and they eat. So there was a very fake study initially that apparently the kids who didn't eat the marshmallow were able to be calmer in life, to be more successful because they can control their urges. But there's another study now that shows that the kids who didn't eat the marshmallow are kids who have grown up in traditions of philosophizing, right? And this means religion, this means where you have a hardcore story, yeah, that is more important, that makes you part of a bigger picture, yeah. And the reason I'm bringing this up is your book, for example, the work you've done, right? That definitely gets more people to meditate because it introduces the stories to them that sell this, right? Same thing with religion, right? But the idea is, if you sell me, like for example, when I started, let me also give my story as when I started, right? When I started, for me, it was very selfish reasons. I read about the Buddha, I was impressed by all these, the mythical, when they write about the Buddha, I was impressed by the superior guy, and it was clear for him, his message is clear. Don't believe me, try it for yourself, right? But, he's all these superior things. So I thought, let me try. And my initial goal in trying to meditate was to be the Buddha, to be that kind of guy who doesn't die, who doesn't live, who's just, who's not human anymore, who's a Buddha. Well, my point was basically that the exaggeration I've read a guy is called Joseph Campbell. His book is called A Hero with a Thousand Faces, right? And his book is about myths and fairy tales and how these stories have moved. Are very similar. Okay, his book is mostly analyzing them, how they are very similar in all situations, in all societies. Yeah, and the point of this is, even if you figure out, unless for example, with math, unless you can force people to learn. You can force kids in a class and tell them if you got Alkanu, and if you don't pass Alkanu, so then they have to learn. Unless you have that kind of power, the best way of sort of motivating free people to do things that don't have immediate effects is philosophizing. Is writing. For example, what you're doing, right, is getting all these cultures, and that's why I was when I started, I hinted on why I thought your book had huge references, many references. When you bring works from other cultures. When you bring the story that I relate to, for example, and you bring the story that the Christian relates to, and you bring the story that the Stoic relates to, and you try to make me see it as, oh, we are all doing the same thing. You're selling me your new story. What you're telling me is basically, okay, now that you agree with me, the Christian and the Buddhist and the Stoic, now sit and breathe. I already trust you because you've made me see, maybe I've been hating Christians, but you made me see Christians a different way and Stoics in a different way. And I'm like, oh, okay, this guy may be actually smart, right? And now I do get to the next step, right? And if the next step also has value, then I get to the other step. So there are three things. The big story is, when you die, you go to heaven. Guess you just start praying, right? When you pray, if you do it right, your mind comes down, you become just it's a meditation as well, right? When you do that, then you start saying, oh, God is doing things for me. Then you start giving. You go to church and start giving. And when you give and, it makes you a better person, makes you a freer person, makes you interact with your people more. You basically keep your goal. You initially started as a guy who wants to go to heaven. At a point where you give, and there's complexities when you give, and the Bible tells you, oh, if you give just to go to heaven, you're not doing it right, blah blah blah, right thinking, the Eightfold Path, right? You start to your goal, your mythical goal basically changes. I'm like, oh, let me just give for the sake of giving, right? But when you forget that I didn't start out as giving. I know there's value in giving for the sake of giving, but initially I didn't start out as giving for the sake of giving. I had a goal that sort of seeing has shown me that my goal was wrong, but it is a good initial goal to have. Then you can become a teacher basically. Then you can say, okay, this is a attract a student, right? And I was telling you about Ingram. So Ingram's book is also like that. It's promising you, the title is of the core teachings of the Buddha. He's promising you that after reading his book, it's an nonsense book of meditation, and after reading it, you'll be one with the Buddha. But at the end, when you read the end, all models of Buddhahood, he's dismissing them. So, the guy who meditates too much, he's basically dissing every version of Buddhahood including God and religion, right? And so basically, he has tricked you through the whole book, but there is value in following his practice, because now at the point you read the end, I'm just meditating to meditate, right? But that's not something you can tell anyone. You can't, unless, of course, like your own child, it's easy to tell them, you do it because your child usually wants to be you. Or, people look up to you, but some people look up to different people who claim to have different practices, right? A lot of people in Uganda want to be Drake, for example, for some reason, right? So it's hard if Drake is telling you in his raps that, oh, every day I go to the club and I get these beaches. It's hard for me to come and tell you, you know what? No, Drake's life is actually not as good. Sit down and meditate, right? The only way is to promise people. I don't know. I think my point is clear there.
Yeah, but you see, and what I don't want to do and what I don't do is to draw parallels. To say that this is, that sitting and meditating is the only way that you can be able to be happy. Yeah. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. That reading my book is the only way that you'll be able to get all these things. That's not what I'm saying. The purpose of writing a book, in my mind, I told you at the beginning I'm a teacher, is to try and teach. But to try and teach meditation in a way that I felt was missing in Uganda, which is for it to be relevant to Ugandans. To see a Uganda talking about something like meditation. And I think the challenge with language, with language is that it allows us to label things. That allows us to understand things, but in labeling things, we put them in a box. Now, we have put meditation in a box. We have put, even by putting in a book, by putting something in a book, perhaps that is what I'm doing. I'm putting meditation in a box. But I hope for anyone who picks up this book, that one, it opens your mind to have what I call beginner's mind, to understand that there are things that we don't know. And perhaps now this book will be able to point some of those things and will allow you to have an appetite for things that you perhaps didn't even think you were interested in. Things like science. Science is not only a preserve of scientists. We see that because from meditation, it allows you, when you question into the nature of things, you start to then now want to understand, what are the fundamental forces? That's another way of learning. That's in my mind. I've learned these things in an easier manner than how I learned them in school, where you just read to cram and do. That can work in certain instances, but usually that habit won't stick. At a certain point, you lose the plot. Again, I'll go back to saying that, but when you look into these things and you try for yourself, you will then get your own experience. But your experience will not be far from what others have gotten, what I have written here. Because the fruits are things that you will not, they're here. And you also find them in your own life if you sat and tried to take the lessons and message from this book. But this book does not say that, as you mentioned, the example that you gave, that because Drake is in the club, doing all these things, that is wrong and that person is living. I don't have the moral authority to say that. I mentioned at the beginning that everything is impermanent. And as such, if I understand that, I also understand that, something that may be bad generally to society at a particular time may be good at another time. But I also understand that some of the things we fear them because we don't understand them. See, and that's maybe an issue I have with some, with certain ways of presenting, like the Word of God, in a manner that if you do this and you don't do this, you're damned to hell, you're damned to this. That in my mind makes everything so, you're looking at things like, this and that. It's one thing pitted against another. You're not looking at the gray areas exist in many things. And sometimes in those gray areas, you're able to find answers. I found many answers in the gray areas. And that's what, for me, that's why I was shocked when you say that meditation, shocked, and I understood the more we conversed why you went away from meditation. It's feeding all these things in that take you away from the simplicity, which is just paying attention to your breath and seeing the fruits of meditation. So I'm hoping there's a whole chapter here on sitting meditation, which shows you how to see. For example, meditation is not about sitting with crossed legs. I sit like this because I am comfortable sitting like this. But it also,
guy was not sitting by
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but sitting like this allows me to have a straight back. And a straight back, meditate by putting your feet down. You notice somewhere along the way, my feet got tired. I put them down, and I will. But I'm more comfortable and I'm more attentive when my legs are crossed and I'm sitting. But you can meditate lying down. You can meditate walking. There's walking meditation. So I want the effect of this book to be that people ask the why, be like, okay, I thought this was all about Buddhism. I thought this was all about, it has meditation. I'm saying this now is Buddhism has taught it. Buddhism has packaged it the way Christianity has packaged prayer, but prayer is a form of meditation. And I've given you an instance. Go and read Mark, how Christ went to meditate by sitting, going away in seclusion. The fact that the man was sitting in a storm and he was calm. Yes, of course he knew he was Christ, but also I would like to think because that man, he was centered. He was focusing on his breath, and that allowed him then to be able to take any storms that were able to, that wanted to be able to blow him away. So if I'm able to then draw parallels from my own life, from my own experiences as a Christian, I am Anglican and I grew up as such. But meditation and having a beginner's mind has also allowed me to think and say, okay, this was one worldview, but there are other worldviews. But thankfully, I've been able to see the connection of all those worldviews. And that's why I agree with you about philosophy. Philosophy allows you to think, allows you to use this brain of ours that's a gift. But philosophy is not about writing flowery language or about getting concepts and quoting Jean-Paul Sartre and talking about existentialism and talking about all these other things. Philosophy is just a simple question of asking why. Why does breathing help? Say, okay, can I try to breathe and see if it will actually give me the same benefits that it has given Kenneth? Okay, if I sit and do so, okay then, but why don't other people also do this? Again, I'll answer the question. But in everything, in summing up what I am saying, and this is something, it's possible that a huge majority of people can be misled. You saw that there was a particular time when a particular race of people thought that black people were not people.
You mean white people?
Yes. And there was a time when slavery was allowed because white people were not seen as human beings. But then we see the more that society went on, the more that people spoke up against these things, and the more that you're seeing this black person is like me, they laugh like me, they talk like me, they're thinking like me. So what really is the difference other than the color of my skin? Then those perceptions start to change. That's why I'm saying perceptions have deceptions. And many perceptions and myths about meditation are because it's been tied up with mysticism, with Buddhism, with all these other things that take away from the simplicity of just paying attention and staying in the present moment.
Yeah, no, I see. Let's go to the other part of the book, the self. I mean, I want you to first introduce sort of how you understand the self, but the goal of basically this discussion wanted us to also talk about free will. I have some thoughts on free will, but I'm very curious because I see we already disagree there. So so the self, right? And I think part of what you put in your book is control. Yeah, you write about control. And let me not shut. Just tell me,
Control is an oxymoron because, you wanting to control things sometimes, as I mentioned, you then lose the essence of what it means to be in control, which is to accept. Control is acceptance. Control doesn't mean, control the way we think about it in that manner. But the self, the way that I surmise it, is the more that you look deeper into your nature, you realize that you have different attributes of you. That you have the physical attributes, which is the form. And that form is the one that allows people to recognize you, the one that allows you to be able to live. And then you have what we call mental formations. Mental formations are your thoughts, your imaginations, all those things. Memory, I would think, is part of your mental formations. But do you agree with me that without memory, you wouldn't have relationships, you would not have...
I would go as far as calling memory a physical thing even.
Now, beyond that, you also have what we call feelings. Other than the physical form that you see here, is if I touch my hand here, I will feel it. I'll feel my hand going over my other hand. And those are other feelings that goes well of anger, of love, worry is not a feeling. Basically, those emotions and sensations. And then the last, which I look at, which some people disagree with, is your consciousness. Your consciousness is separate from your brain. Your brain is the means through which consciousness perceives this world. But consciousness, in my mind, and that's why we keep looking at the observer in meditation, who is observing. Is that the real consciousness? Or is my brain that has created these thoughts the consciousness? But I said, the more you look into things like thoughts, the more you look into that nature is where you start to see that these things can be separated, but are part of you. They form you. You're a myriological sum of all those things together. So my soul, my spirit, my consciousness, I can't hide from the fact I say that I'm Christian. So I believe in existence of a soul. But this soul, the way that I've understood it, is similar to what the scientists call consciousness, which is that intangible, seemingly intangible thing that runs, that is you. That if you separated the body, you separated your thoughts, you separated your feelings, there's still that part of you that exists. And that's what I call consciousness, that's what I call the soul. And so the self is comprised of all these parts. And meditation allows you, one, to see all those parts, but also to be in tune with all those parts. That if my thoughts are not running away from me, my mental formations are in sync with my emotions, with my feelings. That if my feelings, if I'm not overly caught up by desire and gluttony, that I'm looking at now the extreme of feelings that could be beautiful, then I am in sync. And if I'm in sync with my body, with my mind, with my spirit, I am a happy individual.
I see. So, first of all, I don't agree that we are conscious.
Okay.
I think, though, that consciousness is, what's the word? It's sort of an attribute of intelligence. Yeah? And I'm going to, so this is not a thought I've like clearly thought. Like, I don't have it all well thought. I'm going to give you my half thought, and then we shall keep the conversation going from there. First analogy is, so in programming, all programming languages have a function called random. Yeah. So given a collection, say, of things, say a collection of numbers, say from 1 to 1 million, yeah, you can call that function, that collection, and say this collection dot random, so that it can spit out any one random number, right? Okay. So if it's you couldn't tell, for example, what random number it is, right? But these programs are written in a way that they use so like, okay, the programs I know, they're written that they use a lot of information they know about what's computing, right? So they know about the hardware and what to come up with this variable that they use to compute randomness. Yeah, but in essence, it's a computation.
Okay.
Right. So if I did say, I'm going to use the word array to mean that collection, right? If I said an array that has 1 to 1 million, if I said array dot random, it would spit out a number like 10, right? And then it would spit out a number like 100,000, right? And then it would spit like numbers that don't have patterns, right? For me, a pattern I wouldn't recognize, right? But in this sense, since this is a computation, again, the computer is so limited, it can't think, right? There is a pattern to it. It's just a very complex pattern that's full of very, very vague variables, right? If you train a simple machine learning system to watch this computer predict random. So if you give it a big data set, say 1 to 100 billion, yeah, or 1 to 1 trillion, yeah, and let it and train the machine learning system, machine learning system to just learn what the prediction is, and say, tell it when it's wrong and when it's right? Say the random function says you say random 1 and prints 1. Random the first prints 1, and then the machine just picked another number and you say you're wrong, right? And then it says random again, and then it picks say 900,000, whatever, right? And this one got it right. After a period of time, you can train this AI machine to predict what random will do. Because again, random is not entirely random. So it's random just for practical cases of what you want to compute, but it's not entirely random. It's a computation that actually happens for the computer to be able to spit that out, right? But what would happen is if you throw away if you've trained the AI machine well enough to predict every move, it has predicted the variables that constitute this computation, right? If you abstract that away, yeah, and for you the act of you, like if I'm showing you, if I'm telling you that this AI machine is random, is sort of going to, this AI machine that I've built can create random numbers, it will appear, if it's predicting so accurately, it will appear as if that AI machine is the one generating the random numbers, right? So if a person who doesn't know, a person say who has an expectation of what the random number should be, but doesn't know how they're calculated, they won't be able to tell. If you give them blind tests of both programs, they won't be able to tell which one is the AI machine and which one is the actual program computing that random number, right? So in that sense, that is sort of the analogy that I have for what? For consciousness. It is, we are so good a predictive machine about some things that we think we're actually creating them, right? So for right now, I can
like how you have brought it up, but I think if I don't respond there, we'll talk about something else.
Okay. I wanted to just finish this analogy. It will be just the example, the one example.
Okay.
Yeah? So for example, if I wanted to slap you right now, yeah, I can make a conscious mind to slap you.
Okay.
But the way I understand it is, I am so intelligent that I can predict the variables around that will cause this son to slap you in a way that I'll trick myself into thinking that I actually consciously decided to slap you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I really love how you use the example of artificial intelligence. Did artificial intelligence just appear out of nothing?
No.
Okay. Is it the complexity of its nature? Is this something that just came to be?
No.
Okay. So you and I agree that for AI to exist or for computers to exist, man had to exist to be able to create them, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Now, let's try and use the same analogy for our bodies. And if you're saying that you're likening our minds to computers in that manner that you input this and X and Y comes up, that validates my point. As I said at the beginning, that all these things, that can't be random. Someone should have done the programming or the coding using your same analogy.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, okay.
Now, and the reason why I love spirituality and why I love God and why I love the representation of God, for example, in Christianity, is it allows me to have that sense of belonging, to understand that spirit that I spoke about, that consciousness, is a part of a bigger consciousness. We are connected in every sense. There are so many stories, and this is something I want you to appreciate, or I hope you'll be able to appreciate anyway, is that feelings, when you have a feeling about something, what's that? When you have a gut feeling, maybe that's okay, maybe you say it is chemicals. But are there instances like where a mother can feel something is wrong with a child, even when they're not in the same room? Or where you can feel, no?
No, I mean, they're there, but also schizophrenics also have those feelings. So
Okay.
I don't think that's a valid.
Well, the thing with schizophrenia is that everything that you're thinking of, everything that you think is real is actually not. But in this
That's a
instance,
version of
the
schizophrenia.
feelings...
It's a spectrum. There's,
Okay, that's
a
fine.
version of it.
Okay, but in this instance, the feelings that the mother has about a child that's about to die or go into something, there is actual scenarios that actually play out, and that actually happens. But think of love, the feelings that I was talking about. You can also be able to reduce that into chemical emotions and everything else. But if that was the case, why would love be so complex? If it was as simple as just chemicals making love, why are relationships as difficult as they are? Why is love so difficult? No, not even love, relationships actually, because love is simple in my mind. But anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So going into back why I believe I have a soul, as I've said, is I believe that soul is attached to a huge or larger consciousness, what I call God. All of us come from that and draw from that. And you get to see that when you experience, as I've said, with things like psilocybin, you get to see that connectedness to everything, the connectedness to nature, connectedness to other people. Now, if going back to your analogy, if the human brain or the human mind or whatever it is that we have is as complex as you have mentioned it to be, I've just told you, how does AI in real life come to be? Did it just appear out of nothing? Or was it created by guiding hands? Now we can go deeper and deeper into that discussion. Maybe, of course, other people have mentioned about maybe how we're living in a matrix and how they are what. But that same discussion, I'll keep going back and back and back and back. Science talks about the Big Bang. Talks about how light was traveling at supersonic speeds, collided, and then the Higgs boson confirmed that here we are, and we have mass and we have matter. But it doesn't explain what happened perhaps before the Big Bang, or where that light in particular came from. And where I'm going with this is your mind can go as far as it can go. You end up confusing yourself. The reality of it is that our brains cannot comprehend those things. That's where spirituality comes in, where you understand that there are things that you can't comprehend. There are things of God. And that does not mean that you're stupid or you cannot think. It's the understanding of your limits. Understanding your limits is a good way for you to be comfortable with yourself and to understand that there are things beyond this realm that your brain and my brain cannot comprehend. Doesn't matter whether you have Einstein's brain. It does not. No one has those answers. What happened before the Big Bang? Does heaven truly exist? But I know for a fact, because of that evidence I've given to you, because I am here and I can feel myself here, and because of that spirit, that consciousness that I am talking about, and because of the complexity of my brain and of the world, that these things are not random. And then now that also goes into feelings. You make decisions based on your brain, what you think. But beyond that, intuition comes in. Feeling comes in. That's why feeling exists. You have a feeling about someone. You have a feeling about something. And those feelings, all that information interpreted. The same way now we're talking about computing. It's computed by this brain. It's a computer that then allows you to be able to make decisions, to say, I'm going to be this way. This is the persona I have. This is who I'm going to love. This is who I'm going to be. All that information, that data, is computed through this very complex thing, which is the brain. But feelings are intangible. And those feelings and the feeling that I have, based on the evidence I've given to you, that there has to be another guiding force, a God, a creator. Now, that's where my feelings come into play. My gut tells me that God exists. My gut tells me that I am connected to that God. It is confirmed by other people's guts as well that talk about the same thing, and other books like the Bible that try to explain that being that is God. But where I think we lose the plot is where we try to put a form or face to God. As you mentioned, a big guy with a white beard in the sky, a white guy. Those are all things that have been fed to us, and those are things that have taken us away from the truth. And the truth, as I've said, is that we cannot be here randomly.
I see. Okay, so first, there are two reasons that I don't think there's God. One,
May I have some more water, please? Thank you.
One, there is no Luganda word for God.
Katonda.
Katonda is creator, that's an English word. It's an English translation. There is no Luganda word for God. That alone convinces me that if God was there, we didn't know about him, then it's a white people construct. But okay, but anyway.
Listen, actually, I am happy that you have said that. I mentioned to you before that religion is philosophy. Philosophy, as I've said, is what allows you to be able to ask.
I agree. Yeah.
See, actually, like this water here, I've asked for water because when I drink it, it nourishes me. It makes me feel good. When I put it on my lips like this.
That's where I'm going. That's exactly where I'm going.
Now, this water here that has the ability to cure my thirst, to make me feel good. You're telling me it's random that I'll crave water? It's random that our bodies are made, I think, of 90% water. Religion is a philosophy. Faith is its substance. When this whole notion of Christianity in particular, Anglican, Catholicism, the reason why we attach it to the white man is because that was how faith was packaged. And that's why in Asia you see Buddhism packages faith in a different way. African traditional societies package faith in another way. Abechinansi. That doesn't mean you asked a good question. I agree with you. The white man is not the one who brought God here. God existed way beyond any religion, because God is everything. Now, if you could go deeper into that, into what I think God is likened to consciousness, because they are similar. The way you feel about God, the same way you feel about love. That's why God is likened to love. God is likened to that's why they call God spirit. Huh? That spirit, it has its own characteristics. Let's say I feel it not in my physical body, not with my feelings, but I feel it somewhere. Maybe that place that I'm feeling it is that thing that I'm calling spirit or consciousness. But I also agree, and I hope this is something you see as well. In me using these terms, I'm giving them designations. Designations will see us, those particular designations, perhaps we mean the same thing. But because I'm giving them designations and I'm explaining them this way, maybe that's what will make us, get away from the point. But I like that you're a man that thinks, you're a man that understands these things, and I've given you that question. And I hope you answer it as well. The same way Mark here was asking me to answer something else. If it's true that AI is programmable and is created, why can't it be true that mankind was created by a creator?
Okay.
No, I'm asking a question.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm coming to answer. All right. So the God thing and the Uganda thing was a little. Yeah, but let me again, the answer of God is broad, right? So there are three competing stories, right? One is of I think what you're trying to lean towards is the intelligent design, right? I don't entirely disagree with that. What I disagree with is the coincidence that this intelligent designer also happens to be the calculator, right? I don't see those functions complementing each other in any way. If there is a guy who designed the initial life form, right? At least, okay, I'm sure that from bacteria, at least there you believe that there is a path from, say, bacteria, the first single-cellular life form. I believe that there is a path to humanity there that can be explained in technical terms.
Yes, but it does not explain the intangible things I've mentioned, things like love.
I'm going to come to those. Okay, so but in creating the initial form of life, the thing that disobeys entropy, basically we know, okay, I don't know if it's a real law, I don't believe it's a real law, the whole second law of thermodynamics, that entropy will keep increasing, right? We know that it's only life that disobeys that. Anything that has life form organizes things, basically, right? So I don't know. There are two arguments, obviously. There is that Darwinian thing that for me also doesn't make sense a lot, but there is also the intelligent design thing that doesn't also make a lot of sense. So there, I'll say, I'm also very unsure. But yeah, you could be right. There could be an intelligent designer, the way computer programmers program computers, right? That is possible. That, though,
you see, actually,
does not.
That process you're talking about of one thing leading to another, May I ask you a question as well? The water that I had alluded to earlier, this is water that we assume, if you're in Kampala, you've boiled it or you have bought it, but that water is still water that comes from the ground, correct? Now, ultimately, if you look at a lake is a lake. There's water that is available in the lake, correct? But how did that lake come to be? Do we agree that at particular moments, clouds have to form? And those clouds then, what are they called? Nimbus? They form, all those hydrogen mixes with oxygen, mixes with all these other gases and creates rain. The rain falls, goes into the lake. Is there a difference between the cloud, the rain, and the lake?
I think so, yeah.
Those are different because of the designations we have given to them and because of how we are perceiving them. But if you look deeply into the nature, you see they're the same. It's one state transitioning into another. That's how life is. And that's why I believe in that cycle. One thing does not, just because I'm human like this, doesn't mean it just ends here. One thing I mentioned to you in the first podcast we had was about looking at time in a linear manner. That is a construct because of our perceptions, because of our feelings, because of this body that helps us to see time that way. But we also understand that when you go deeper into the circadian rhythm, right? I write about it in the book, that every living thing follows a clock, which is day and night. Every living thing. You don't need a watch to tell you about time. And that's how time goes. But there are things that do not follow the rules of time, like your imaginations, those thoughts, your spirit, your consciousness. Now, something transitioning from one state into another gives me or confirms to me that things are impermanent. They're always moving like that.
Okay, you have to let me, if you ask a big question like...
but hold on, Celine, if you want to leave, you can. No, otherwise, I'm really enjoying myself here. Okay.
If you ask a question like, tell me that God doesn't exist, and then you give me two lines, it won't make sense to me. Yeah, it's like making these thoughts come together in a way that is comprehensive enough, at least to put up an argument, would require a little bit of talking. So allow me, right? First of all, I wanted us to twist this towards free will, but it seems we are now back on God, and I want to first confront this.
We can go to free will.
Yeah, but there are two things that I wanted us to agree on, right? Do you believe in evolution of life? Okay, so not believe, like, do you understand that concept of over time, over millions of years, single-celled organisms evolving into multi-celled organisms as a way of surviving? Sort of Darwinian biology starting with what? I don't know, okay, how, it doesn't for me justify very well, like time before life. But after the first form of life, so I'll be very open to saying aliens brought life to Earth. Yeah. But a time after the first single-celled organism, the evolution of Earth, since I think Darwin's theory explains that very conclusively for me.
Yeah, but Darwin's theory has been, I don't want to say disproved, because there are other scientists that followed Darwin. There's a guy called Mendel. There are other scientists of Francis Galton and the rate. I think Galton in particular carried out experiments on fruit flies, looking at what causes genetic defects, or why do particular animals evolve, or is it to survive? Now, those experiments, especially on those fruit flies, confirm that many of those evolutionary processes can be random. In some instances, they happen to be able to allow the particular species to be able to adapt, but in some instances, they are random. And this is a fact. So Darwin's theory is not conclusive to a fact that there's survival for the fittest and that evolution existed solely to be able to allow particular species to be able to evolve or to stay on this earth. That's one worldview and one perspective. I think you can see. Hold on.
That's not Darwin's theory, at least not the way I understand it, right? So, Darwin calls his book The Origin of Species, but I don't think it explains the origin. Yeah. I think the origin is still open to an intelligent designer.
Good.
Darwin.
So we agree there's an intelligent designer.
I'm saying it's open. I'm agnostic. It
Okay.
could be. I don't know. I'm not.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm not.
But where does evidence point?
Yeah?
Where does evidence point?
I don't know.
You see,
for me, it's all
that's my problem with agnosticism. And this is something I'm saying very clearly to all the agnostics and the atheists. Sometimes evidence is staring you right in the face. But you make a choice. You make a choice. No, they are not. But you make a choice and say, I'm going to ignore all this information. I'm going to ignore the fact that I have seen robbers. Someone has told me there are robbers along the way, that there are snares there, and I'm still just going to walk that path.
Okay, so let me give you a case against what? God. Yeah? God today, right?
But you were talking about Darwin before we go to God.
You disrupted me, and I want you to make clear why we can't. The reason I don't think atheists have a valid argument, they're opposite. The theists, I also don't think they have a valid argument. God is the placeholder for I don't know. Yeah? When basically today there is no practical use of God. So when you see theories like I don't know why they call it a theory. When you see Big Bang, yeah, for some reason scientists just sat down and accepted that this is how life began, yet there is no actual proof, right? But when you see that, yeah, Big Bang, the couple of formulas, the couple of mathematical concepts, yeah, that are derived to try and prove Big Bang that are valuable today. Yeah, things that you see, atomic bomb, splitting the atom, what's going to be nuclear energy right now, a lot of quantum physics, yeah, is aimed at sort of conclusively defining the origin of what? Of life. Yeah? But even if it doesn't conclusively define the origin of life, we know we are going in the right direction because a lot of this quantum physics is, okay, maybe I'll tell you 1976. A lot of what we learned as modern physics, a lot of what is modern physics can be practically used, even if it doesn't completely answer the question of what? Where do we come from, right? On the other hand, when you look at the God idea, yeah, it depends on how charismatic the guy who's introducing you to God is, right? But otherwise, you can just replace whatever he says God, you can just replace I don't know, and you still come up with the exact narrative that he's making, right?
You see, and the challenge is you have put I don't know as a negative thing.
No, in a good way, I'm saying in a good way.
Science authoritatively told us that every single thing in the universe operates by the same rules. Until someone, I forget the name, discovered black holes. Hawking Stephen wrote an entire paper talking about how time, how matter, all those things are different when you're looking at black holes. And that poked, you don't know how many scientists almost killed themselves. Because they had these theories about how they thought this is it, there's nothing else. Let me tell you, evidence.
Black holes don't disobey the rules of physics.
Okay.
They comply.
All right, this one we can park a discussion.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is sometimes the things that we think we know, and science sometimes lies to us that they are complete answers. But just because I'm seeing this is a table, this is a chair, this is this, then that's it. There's no other evidence to the contrary. Why I don't know is so powerful is with understanding. Now, that's why I'm saying questioning and going into the nature of things. You start to see that the reason why this is a table is because we are human beings in the sense that we have eyes, we have ears, we have hands, and so what I perceive most likely will be what you perceive. Until you remove these physical attributes. That's why I talked about psilocybin. It's a very strange thing what psilocybin does. It changes or alters like your mental perception, start to see things differently. Start to see that this may seem like a table now in real life because we have nothing else separate. But not that it could be an elephant, but it could be a different form. And that's why I'm saying that's the danger of all these. That's why mental formations form part of the self. That was where we came from. Okay. Mental formations allow us to perceive this world. The eyes here, if I'm using that example, the lens through which the brain or consciousness is able to enjoy or perceive the natural world the way that we see it. But science does not explain everything. And saying I don't know
is a valid question.
So many people have opinions in this world, Kenneth.
Exactly. So what I'm saying, Ken, is instead of saying God, if you say who created the world, or why are we intelligent, or how come the intelligent, the AI, yeah, which is AI is not also intelligent. If you compare intelligence, if you set humanity as the standard for intelligence, AI is it's not intelligent at all, right? But if you say, oh, AI is created by humans, how come we claim we are not created by humans, right? I think the valid answer instead of God, right? If you don't want to go through the whole confusing Darwinian thing, the valid answer would be, I don't know, right? Agnostic. That's why I consider myself agnostic, right? So if you look at this in terms of function, right? What is, say for example, there are things that are not proven. Big Bang Theory, for example, it's not proven, right? But it's the consensus, like climate change is not proven. It's the consensus of scientists, right?
I hear you.
The consensus of scientists is this is most likely the explanation, this energy crashing thing is most likely the explanation of the beginning of time, right? Why is this important, right, compared to God? Is if you believe this, yeah, and you try to follow down through where that physics goes, yeah, you can still use that physics, even if it doesn't conclusively explain how the Big Bang starts time, you can still use that physics to do practical things today in the world, or to predict the position of the farthest planet.
Yes.
That light can reach in reasonable time, right?
Yes.
This is still practical and it still has applicable usability, right? On the other hand, there is God, right? This thing that whoever wants to define it defines it their way, right? One guy will tell you God is omnipotent. The other guy will tell you you are God and I am God and God is one and all. Then other guys will just bring a bunch of contradictions and say these are God. God is good and bad. God is tall and short. God is, things like that. Yeah? When you say, okay, now that you've defined for me your God, mention for me one function of God. One function of God. One thing that God does that humans can't do. And then you start making up things you don't know how they happen naturally that God does. Oh, God creates earthquakes. You're like, no, actually. Then after like a few years, the scientists come up with how earthquakes are created. And you're like, no, God actually does the thing that the scientists separates earthquakes. I told you this in the last thing.
Yeah, but honestly, Ken, but Kenneth,
the
I am not sure, and that's why I said the confusion comes in as well.
Yeah.
If you're trying to explain something, a concept as intangible as God, why in the world would you then try to use measurable tools to be able to explain something that is like that?
That's a very good question.
So if you are talking about function denotes just because as human beings we're trying to find meaning, and this leads to that. If you think of God that way, chances are you'll remain in a loop where you try to find evidence based on what, and chances are you'll then lose the plot. Think of God existing outside of all these constructs. And why I said, and going back to what I was talking about, if you want me to use evidence, I've given you the evidence to show that if all these things we're talking about were random.
So, here's the analogy. Let me make it again for people who are listening, right? This very spiritual guy, not an intelligent guy, finds a child, yeah? And then they have a conversation about the beginning of the world, the things we're talking about right now. And then the child asks the guy, but what is the earth standing on? Basically, what is supporting the earth? And then the guy says, oh, the earth is supported by a big elephant, a very big elephant, because in his perception, the elephant was the biggest thing to think about. Then the kid asked him, okay, that makes sense. But what is the elephant? What is supporting the elephant, right? And then the guy is like, each leg of the elephant is being supported by a turtle. I don't know why I came up with that. And then the kid was like, so what is supporting the what? The turtle. And the guy didn't have an answer. He said, no, it's just turtles. Tortoises, all the way down, right? So, first of all, this guy makes the assumption that there is an up and a down, right? Because of gut feeling, right? The same thing as the kid. When you're sitting here, you assume the earth is flat and the legs are down, and the head is up, right? But until Newton could mathematically explain that actually we are all just circling around this mass, yeah? That's how we get to know that we as humans feel up or down relative to the earth because of the gravitational force of the earth, but the earth is also not down relative to anything. It's probably down relative to the sun because of the gravitational force of the sun, and the sun the same thing because of the gravitational force of the galaxy center, and you know, and so goes on.
Have you heard of the Egyptian pyramids?
Yes.
Do you know how old they've existed?
Yes. Okay, now I don't know about that.
Did they come before or after Newton?
Before. They came before. Yes.
When you look at the circumference of a pyramid, this is all scientific facts you can be able to get. Since we're talking about science, you start to see that they mirror dimensions of the earth.
Yeah. Okay. For me, that's not mysterious.
Now, Auntie, you said that that Newton is that after Newton determined that at the
Newton wasn't the first
that
thing.
the earth is round and the rest.
Was because Galileo was stupid enough to contradict the position of the church that said the earth was the center of the universe, right? But Galileo wasn't the first person to have that thought. It's just that he was a foolish one among the people who had that thought to say, to what openly say it. It's the same thing here when you see the political things that are going on. Yeah, everyone sees them. Every Ugandan sees them. But the guy who's going to get written in history as the guy who called out Museveni is the guy Museveni is going to murder for saying the things that every Ugandan sees, right? So even before Newton. Yeah, okay, what Newton did, what the genius of Newton was his ability to what? To express things mathematically in a way that you can't argue. You know, his greatest contribution, I think, was his mathematics calculus specifically, right? And maybe the rules of physics, which I doubt whether he came up with those ones. But yeah. The fact that he had a way of formally expressing concepts, his thoughts, in a way that if I gave you the book, yeah, I gave you Principia, and I told you to read it, you'll understand things exact way as I'm telling them. That became another level of storytelling that communicated ideas so accurately that two people can agree on one thing in a way that is exactly the argument we had, right? That is conclusively decided that this is what we agree on, right? So that's why I brought Newton. But the fact that the sun, the earth rotates around the sun and so forth, I was just saying that these guys were oblivious of that knowledge because they got feeling, the stories that,
the people at the time of Newton.
It's sensorial intuition. No, it's not. It doesn't matter what time it was. Right?
Yeah, but I've just put it to you or brought it to you that the Egyptians and the pyramids that they built were built around the solar system. And there are particular drawings actually for certain civilizations where they have drawings of planets. And so how did these people know all these things at that particular time?
That's what I'm saying. People knew these things until the Catholic Church decided that the truth is their God. And so this is a political statement. The Newtonian revolution is a political statement. I'm not saying the knowledge itself was not available.
All right.
Yeah, this guy was inspired by Eastern stuff, but all that stuff was there. But what I'm saying is, for this specific example, right, a person who follows his gut to understand the world, right? Because again, most of the people who claim God is there, there is when you ask them how do you know, they say I know it in my gut. Yeah, but what this analogy for the tortoises is to show that the gut can be way off. Yeah, if it doesn't have enough information.
Of course, and we're on the same page. But I'd like to maybe close that particular discussion by asking you a question. How do you know that I am a human being?
So yeah, there are social definitions of what a human being should be, and you pass them, and so yeah, I'm 99% sure that you're human.
Okay, but can you authoritatively tell that I am exactly the same as you?
No.
Can I also tell that I am the same as you? Now, my friend, if I went into the world thinking that every person is an alien or every person is another being, chances are I would be labeled, as you said, either schizophrenic or I'd be this. But beyond that as well, you wouldn't be able to live. You wouldn't be able to do anything. You wouldn't be able to enjoy. But I take the information that I have, because there's no evidence to the contrary, that the person sitting in front of me has a brain the way that I do, perhaps is thinking the way that I do.
I see.
That's
I
the
see.
problem
Yeah, okay,
of consciousness. That's the problem of now going beyond that. Ultimately, all those discussions about whether God exists or not, we're going into the realm as to whether all of us are human beings
I
or
see,
not.
I see. No, that's valid. That's valid. So what you're saying basically is that at a point X, where I present you evidence, which I have but I left at home, that God doesn't exist, you'll change your mind.
I'm saying that I have experienced God.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, yeah.
And
in
that
case I have
experience-
evidence, the same way this tortoise guy didn't have like Newton's telescope to see what the planets look like. In the sense where I bring for you that evidence and I show it to you like this, you'll change your mind.
Well, I will wait for that time. Because you see, most times as well,
Yeah, no,
we end. No, the truth is that many times, whenever we have different
okay.
opinions, or whenever whenever we don't know something, other than saying I don't know, or other than sticking to what you know, no, you then start you come up with scenarios. Until those scenarios happen, let me worry about that
Okay,
then.
okay,
For
that's-
now,
that's
I am
valid.
strong
That's
and firm
valid.
in my
Yeah, that's fair,
convictions.
that's fair.
Until that happens, we shall meet each other there.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so the other thing now is free will.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, my assumption was, if you believe in evolution and all that, the forces that are always at play are so vast that you don't have a say. And you give a great example for the other side of, we choose to what? To go and jog. Yeah, I know for sure that the environment will choose for you whether you can jog or not. First of all, some people just don't have enough time. So they are basic. Okay, I believe that they are basic instincts that as people, the same way a toddler is born and then the toddler you put the toddler on the nipple and the toddler can suckle, right? I think that basic instincts to feed, excrete, and maybe the sex, I don't know. Like, there are basic instincts that are just part of the machine, part of his physical body we have, right? And I think those are the basic instincts. When they come into a complex society, that can become these things we consider to be complex decision making, because of the multitudes. There's I don't know how much math you did, but if you
failed math.
So there's permutations. I don't know, what was it? I forget whether it was A level or level, right? But permutations. If you have collections and you try to match them between other collections, you end up with multiple combinations of things, right? And I think that kind of complexity is why the world looks so complex, and it looks like everyone every day comes up with a theory and a new book of how we should make decisions, how we should be more important and things like that. But in essence, I think that's what was actually beautiful about your book, is sort of explaining that, accepting.
Yes, but also talking about free will and determinism, I write, that's something I strongly believe, we live in a deterministic universe. In the sense, as you've said, one thing leads to another. Many times we don't have control, we don't have a choice over what happens to us or where we are. And that's true in society mostly. That you will have all your ideas about what you want to do, but if you don't package them in a certain way, you end up going to the grave with those particular ideas. But why I believe in the concept of free will is that free will is a preserve in my mind of your consciousness, of your spirit. Because you are now, and also your thoughts, the inner you. Because you make choices, then you can choose to be free, you can choose to believe in X, you can choose to believe in Y. Whether that choice is then translated into action, into this other world, if it's a deterministic universe and you know that in order for you to live comfortably in society, you have to wear clothes, I can decide to make a choice that I'm going to walk naked. That is free will. The choice that I will choose to do something, whether it has gone against what society knows or what is seen as the norm. But since we live in a deterministic universe, chances are as soon as you get outside your home, even before you get outside, people will have already dragged you inside. Because they're like, you can't walk around naked. That means you're mad, you're wrong. So I believe that we live in a deterministic universe, but we have free will, which is a preserve of our inner selves. And other philosophers have thought this way. St. Augustine of Hippo is the one that philosophized about free will and talking about how, in essence, God gave us free will, but And the free will is evidenced by the grace of God, knowing that at the end of the day, you still have the grace of God, but it's up to you to choose it or to reject it. Other Stoic philosophers, as I was saying, like Epictetus, is it Epictetus? Epictetus is talking about how you can be sick and yet happy. That shows that even in the midst of a deterministic universe, the choice to sit comfortably and be kawa, that shows that there is an element of free will.
I see. Yeah. I think this is a good point to conclude. The conversation. There's always been that duality of whether there's, again, those are some of the things like consciousness. I don't think we are capable of figuring out decisively.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's why I keep telling you, that's why when I started, I spoke about the principle of non-duality. Duality confuses us that we now start to look at things from one worldview. And that's why, again, I'm a Christian, but many Christians think that Christianity is the only thing, that the Bible is the only book that contains the secrets of the universe. But that's not true. That's one worldview. One worldview. And if we consider these concepts in that manner, in a manner that's binary, this and that, duality, that there is this and then there is that. You start as a human being and then all those states are happening all at once. Imagine someone who is observing things or something observing things from outside of our scope of understanding. The ash and the bones that you'll turn into when after you die will be the same thing as them. They'll see before you were born, when you're living, and they're all states transitioning. You're the same being. Now, whether that being is the consciousness that we're seeing here, maybe our true state is before we are born, which is, I don't know. So ultimately, when you understand the concept of non-duality, hinged on the premise that everything is impermanent, you then start to appreciate the things that you perceive are here, that are right now. And that's where enlightenment is, my friend. I hope that's where we end.
Yeah, no,
that enlightenment is in the here and now.
This is a good conversation. I've tried to play devil's advocate as much as I could so you can get the thoughts out clearly.